Video games like Postal.
Going postal.
Going postal. New video game. It's called Postal.
There are a lot of people that really wish we would go away, but it's never going to happen.
Their whole premise is so over the top. It's so ridiculous.
There was a video game called Postal. We just ran around shooting people.
Oh, this is going to piss off your viewers, isn't it? Oh, well.
Going Postal, The Legacy Foretold, a new documentary about the history of running with scissors. On Apple TV, Amazon, and Blu-ray. Go to goingpostaldoc.com. That's goingpostaldoc.com. And tell them In the Keep sent you. Hey man, are you tired? Coffee's just not doing it for you these days. Let's talk about something different. Let's talk about cacao. Cacao comes from the Theobroma plant. Broma means food, and Theo means, well, God. So why aren't more of us talking about this godlike food source? Packed with antioxidants, polyphenols, theobromine, which is like caffeine but without the jitters, healthy fat, low carbs, protein, magnesium, calcium, and the highest plant source concentration of iron known to man. Why aren't we consuming this stuff every day? Well, you can. Our partners at Cora Cacao offer ceremonial grade cacao, sustainably sourced, plant to paste from fair trade farms in the Mayan motherland of Guatemala. Cora Cacao is committed to delivering cacao products to you at reasonable prices in a way that makes the world a better place for all involved. Whether you're making morning cocoa lattes, iced cacao, hosting a meditation ceremony, or just doing alchemy in your mom's basement, Cora Cacao is committed to supplying you with the highest grade stuff for what you, your body, and your mind need. So head on over to coracacao.com. That's coracacao.com. Use promo code INTHEKEEP, one word, all caps, at checkout for 10% off your order. It's time to replace those bad habits with good ones, and using Cora Cacao for your energy and nutrient needs is a great place to start. I'm proud to call Cora Cacao a partner of In the Keep, and I hope that you will be proud to call them a new part of your daily routine. Much love. The more and more each is impelled by that which is intuitive, or the relying upon the soul force within, the greater, the farther, the deeper, the broader, the more constructive may be the result. Edgar Cayce.
I started learning about astrology decades ago, in the early 80s. And I was living in Atlanta, Georgia, and they had a metaphysical center there. And I went there and I signed up to take a tarot card reading class. And I took the class, and they were talking about, well, the stars mean this, and the color of the gown means that, and if you turn it upside down, it means something else. Oh, this is way too complicated for me. And so I said, I can't do this. So then I decided to sign up for a beginning astrology class. And I did. I thought, oh, this is much easier.
Astrology is simpler than tarot cards, is what you're saying.
I'm saying it was simpler for me.
Okay.
Many years later, I started to realize how wrong I was. Oh, for most people, it's the other way around.
Right.
For most people, tarot cards are much easier and astrology is much harder. But for me, astrology just made sense, and so it was easy. So I did a beginning class, and I practiced on family and friends, and I took an intermediate class. And by the time I was in my intermediate class, people were sending me people. And I was like, no, no, I'm not going to read for anybody else. Don't do that. But I accidentally fell into being an astrologer.
That's it's really crazy. Like I still can't get over the somehow. I guess some people like math and some people like reading, and it's just two different things. But like to me, learning all of the intricate details and like the positional logic that goes into astrology seems so much more than just like, okay, well, this lady's wearing a blue dress and a blue dress means this. Next, like, but I get what you mean. Atlanta, I'm not far from Atlanta. I'm actually in Columbia, South Carolina nowadays. Yeah, but Atlanta's it's a pretty big hub for metaphysical stuff. I mean, you have the OTOs headquarters are there. The Theosophical Society has a really large representation. But the center that you went to, this is in the 80s. So what was that?
This was in the 80s. The name of it was called the Foundation of Truth,
Okay.
but it's no longer there and hasn't been for many years. But it was a wonderful place where you could sign up to take classes. They had different speakers come in. It was very inexpensive. They had weekly services. They had meditation classes. So it was a very grounded way to sort
Mm,
of be exposed to some of the more metaphysical concepts. And I wish it was still there because it was a wonderful place to be, very open-minded kind
yeah.
of thing. And I learned a lot about a lot of different pieces, but I think it was in the late '90s, early 2000s that it closed its doors. It was actually the headquarters of the Daughters of the American Revolution.
Okay.
That's where the building was. The DAR owned the building,
Mm,
but they said, "We don't use it a lot," so they rented it out to the Foundation of Truth, and somehow this, sort of very woo-woo metaphysical organization and this much more traditional conservative organization, they just came together and it worked. And so that's where I started to learn. And in beginning astrology, there's very little math. There's no math. You're learning about the signs, you're learning about the planets, you're learning about the houses.
mm,
So when I started to learn astrology, I was like, oh, that's why I see that. Oh, that's why they do that.
mm,
Like, stuff's just started to make sense to me. Oh, it's not me. They're just being a Taurus,
yeah.
like, I started to look at things in a very different way, so it's very meaningful to me right off the bat.
Yeah, I think that the Nancy Reagan gave astrology a bad name.
She
Just to put the nail on the head, like, right there. There's so much misunderstanding about what astrology is because of the popularity of, like, newspaper horoscopes, and not that there's anything wrong with, like, your sun sign, like, there's no bad way to approach that, it's just that people think it's complete BS because that's all they see, and then when they go to someone and they ask for justification of it, most people cannot explain to them what the use of it is or where the science of it came from. And I use the word science. I think it is a science. I think it's just a very complex science that we've sort of lost our it's almost like an atrophied muscle. Like it's something that we haven't used for a long time. So I wanted to have when I was going through the list of people like 40 years, perfect. This she has to know how to explain this, at least to, to my audience, people who are curious about how this all works and what the meaning of it is and how they can apply it to their own lives. It's a lens. It's like having a tinted glasses. You remember the movie They Live with Roddy Piper, where he has the sunglasses that let him see that everything around him is a lie. Like,
Yeah, astrology, that's a good astrology in a way lets you look beyond the
mm,
surface,
hmm,
and the way I explain it to people is that going to an astrologer is like going to an investment counselor.
sure,
You go to investment counselor and they're gonna give you their advice. "Oh, I think the bond market's gonna do this, and I think gold's gonna go up or down, or you might wanna look at this." They're gonna give you their advice, and
right,
you go home and you think about it. You make your own decisions.
mm,
Astrology is not in charge of anybody. So they come to me and I'm like, "I think this might be a good way to go or be aware of this." But each person is in charge of their own life.
right,
Astrology doesn't have any power over you. Astrology may be able to help point out, "Oh, this might be a better time to do that," or this may be the easier way to go about that.
Mhm.
But it doesn't stop you from doing anything. It doesn't make you be one way or another. We are the ones who decide that.
Right.
So when somebody says, "Oh, I'm not good at math because my Mercury's in,
Retrograde.
retrograde or
Yeah.
something," I'm like, "No, no, 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 no.
Yeah.
Don't pull that with me."
I hate the Mercury's in every time someone says the words Mercury's in retrograde, my wife, who can probably hear me right now saying this, is like, I'm just like, "No, stop. Come on. You can't blame that on everything. Everything can't be Mercury's in retrograde." But for people who are not, like, fully initiated into the idea of what that means, if Mercury is moving backwards, that the symbolism, just coming from a symbolic point of view of the god of wisdom is moving backwards in your world, could mean a lot if you understand what they're saying when they say that, but we kind of hide it behind this very, normal English way of saying it. Someone saying that in Latin, newsflash, sounds a lot different.
I'll give you a tiny little
Yeah.
bit of correction there because the planet does not actually move backwards.
It
But
from our
our point
perspective.
of view on
Yeah.
Earth, it
Right.
looks like it's going backwards.
Yes.
And so, the planets are not actually deciding to move in a different direction, but from the point of view on Earth, it looks that way.
Now you sound
And
like an
when the
astronomer, not
planet yes,
Yeah.
seems to be moving backwards, things don't obviously move forward as clearly or cleanly as you would like.
Mhm.
A friend of mine was just having surgery, and she said, "Susan,
Mm.
would you look and see if Mercury's retrograde while I'm gonna have this surgery?"
Right.
And it wasn't. But think of those first 2 letters, RE. We redo, we regenerate. So you don't wanna have that when you're going into surgery. You don't wanna have to redo the surgery. You don't wanna have to, go back and, "Oh, we missed this," kinda thing.
Mm.
Astrology is meant to be used as a tool to help you understand your life and make your life easier to use. That's how I use it.
Mhm.
That's how I explain it and deal with it to my clients. It's not some woo-woo magical thing. It's not gonna make anything happen. I've had clients come in and ask me for the winning lottery numbers. I cannot give them to you, and what I usually say
The
to them
numerologist is down the hall. I talk to him. Yeah.
maybe the numerologist can give me winning lottery numbers, but the astrologer cannot.
Yeah, right.
And I'm like, "Does this look like my villa in the south of France?" Because if I could pick the lottery numbers, I would have done that already.
Mm.
So you're right. Many times the public has a very distorted view of what astrology can and cannot do. And I hate that because astrology can be a wonderful tool to help us understand ourselves better. But there's a lot of misconceptions. A lot of people are embarrassed to go to an astrologer. They don't want somebody thinking they're stupid or ignorant, or only uneducated people go to an astrologer. I have and no offense to the male gender, but I have a lot of wives come in and say, "Well, I want a reading for my husband."
Mm.
And I'm like, "Is he okay with that? Does he know you're here?
Yeah.
Is he fine with getting a reading?" "Oh, yeah, he wants to do it. He just doesn't want to come in and see you himself." And so then the husband will be like, what'd she say? I'm totally not interested, but what'd she say about me?" And so people are interested, but they don't wanna be mocked. They don't wanna look like they're not smart or not making good decisions. And so I understand that. And I try to be as clear and as honest and as open as I can with the people that come to me, because astrology is a wonderful tool for helping you understand yourself better and feeling good about yourself. And I have several therapists that will send me their clients, and they'll be like, "You know what? We're getting to this subject. You might want to talk to Susan." And I look at a chart. I have no idea what they're doing with their therapist.
Mm.
And I'll start to explain their chart. And they'll be like, "Oh, that's what my therapist keeps saying." I'm sure they don't believe me when I tell them I haven't talked to their therapist.
Right.
But then they can go back and they're hearing maybe the same thing in a way they can understand better. So it's just broadening our viewpoint. We don't have to accept it, but we're looking at things in different ways. And it's one of the things I love the most about astrology.
So let's try to walk a little bit through like the history of astrology and where it all comes from, because many different cultures have different points of view about astrology. I think in Western culture, obviously, we get ours from, the Hermetic philosophy that was given to the ancient Greeks, and then from them to the Latin world, and then from that across the Western world. But, then you have south of the equator, you have the Eastern astrology and everything. But what's your tradition and where do you come from?
Well, I'm a Western astrologer. Eastern astrologers are called Vedic astrologers, and they work a little bit differently.
Mm.
And astrology goes back as old as man, and it goes back to the time of men on Earth looking up at the sky and seeing the stars. And just like we may lay out in the backyard and look at clouds and go, oh, look, that one looks like a bird or that one looks like a ship.
Mm.
They looked up at the stars and said, oh, look, that one looks like an arrow going up into the sky. So they started to look up at the heavens and made up their own stories, made up their own names, just like we may call certain stars the Big Dipper or the Little Dipper. Even now with all the smog and the pollution, you can look up at the sky and even I can pick out the Big Dipper. It looks like a big ladle or something.
Mm.
So they did the same thing.
Add the big.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. There you go.
Mm.
So then they started to understand the movements of the moon. Oh, when the moon is full, we get these big crops. Or when the moon is in this constellation, we have fewer crops. They started to understand in very unscientific terms the power of the moon. And they started to realize, oh, you want to plant when the moon is in this sign. And, I do not know how they made up the names for the archer or the ram or, it looks like an archer. We'll call that the archer. I'm not sure how Sagittarius came from the archer, but they made up the names for what the star systems look like.
The centaurs were known to be archers, right?
Yes, there you go.
Right. So some people say that because the Khans rode on horseback and they were great archers, that the idea of the centaur came from that to the Greeks. I don't know, but I believe that's
I
why.
don't either, but it makes a lot of sense.
Right. Because you would think bow and arrow, Eros, right, or Cupid, but apparently not.
And in Sagittarius, they shoot the arrow into the sky.
Mm.
And Sagittarius is a sign known for the higher mind, the philosophies, looking for the deeper meaning of things. So if you look in the Bible, and I do not in any way mean to disparage anybody's religion or faith or the Bible, but the three wise men, they were astrologers.
There were three magi following the star to the east to come to worship. Matthew 2, chapter 2 for my Bible people out there. Yeah.
There you go. So kings and queens and emperors and rulers looked to the astrologers to explain the stars to them. Is this a good time to go to war? Is this a time when we'll be successful? And I feel kind of sorry for a lot of the astrologers back then because if they were wrong and the war was not successful, they were put to death. I didn't like your answer. Boom, you're gone. But
There's the movie The Life of Brian where the three magi get the house wrong and then they follow Brian around for the rest of his life and Jesus is just over there doing his thing.
just the neighbor kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
they had a responsibility to advise, to give their advice, to say what they thought this would mean. And this came about through trial and error, not through scientific means or whatever. Over many, many thousands of years, the planets started to move a little bit. Or there's tropical astrology and sidereal astrology, and more Western astrologers use tropical, and more Eastern astrologers use sidereal. And sidereal is sort of like the actual position, and tropical is really not as accurate. So somebody was saying, well, why do you use tropical then? And the answer was because it works. Because when I look at a chart and I use tropical, and I may say, this is what's going on in your chart, or this is what I see, my client can understand that. It makes sense to them. Well, I've looked at having my chart done with Vedic astrology and with more Western astrology, and the Western works for me. It speaks to my spirit. Doesn't mean I don't have great respect for Eastern astrology and Vedic astrology. They're close, but they're a little different too. So timing is a little different between the two systems. But each one has its proponents.
Mm.
Each one offers something. When I'm reading for somebody, and by the way, I'll just throw this out because it's coming to me. If you ever want me to read for you, let me know. I'll be happy to offer that to you as a gift to see what you think of Western astrology reading for you.
Okay.
I
You
tell
wanna
my
you wanna do it on the show, or do you wanna do it like
Oh,
Yeah.
I never even thought about doing that on the show. That would
You
be kind of
you
fun.
never met me before today, so we can get through this intro part, and then I'll give you all of my birthday information down to the minute, and then you can go from there if you want.
Well, I would have to run a chart for you
Oh, okay. Yeah.
and get a chart. So probably wouldn't work with the natal chart in this minute because I'd have to have a few minutes to run a chart and create the chart and maybe look at it.
Mm.
But you can, what sign are you?
Uh, Sun sign is Taurus.
Okay. My whole family is Taurus.
Mm.
My mother was a Taurus, my father was a Taurus, my sister was a Taurus, my friends are Taurus.
My wife and my son and my wife's sister are all Tauruses. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Taurus is an earth sign.
mm.
And so, they're very grounded. They're very basic. They're very practical. You know, Another sign is over here. Let's have a party. And Taurus is great. Let's let our calendars out. Let's find the right date. We need a plan. Who's going to pay for this? Where are we going to have it? The other person's like it'll be a blast. And you're like, well, who's going to clean up after this? Is
Me.
anybody,
I
going to
am.
help?
Yeah.
It's about the earth.
Yeah.
Taurus is very loyal because Taurus is considered to be a fixed, F-I-X-E-D sign. Fixed is another word for stubborn. And no offense in any way, but you can be kind of stubborn. I'm sure your wife would agree with me on this. You're like,
And
no,
I would
I'm not
agree with
stubborn
you.
at all.
I would agree with you. Yes. I think everyone in my life has told me like I'm a stubborn ass at some point, and it's just that's
I'd
true.
say
But
thank you. I'm a
yeah,
Taurus. I'm supposed to be a stubborn ass.
yeah, yeah.
Other signs, Aries is very impulsive. It's very quick. It has a good idea. It says, let's do this. But then Aries is going to lose interest in it. They move on to something else.
Mm.
Taurus is the one who comes in and says, let's finish this. We're going to see this through to the end. So they're very loyal. And once a Taurus makes a commitment to you, by God, they're going to keep it. Come hell or high water, they're going to keep it. They don't cut and run at the first sign of trouble.
Mm.
Sometimes when they should. Lots of Tauruses have very long-lasting marriages because they know how to hunker down and see something through. They're not gonna just say, "Oh, this isn't working, let's walk away." On the other hand, sometimes they don't know how to cut their losses when they should walk away. Let's say you're a woman who's a Taurus and your husband is physically abusive and has put you in the hospital a few times. At what point do you say, "This isn't healthy for me"? So sometimes Taurus can struggle with changing direction when they need to. It's like, no, I'm supposed to do it this way. I'm like this.
Mhm.
Now, I'm going to say very recently, this year, in fact, two planets that used to be in Pisces have moved into Aries. And this is going to affect Taurus in a certain way. Because first in March, Neptune left the sign of Pisces and it put its big toe into Aries. And then on the 26th, what is that today? What day is today? Is that
Today
yesterday?
is the 27th of May.
Yesterday, for the first time in 2.5 years, Saturn left the sign of Pisces and put its big toe into Aries.
Mm.
Now, this means both of these are going to activate your 12th house. In astrology, the 12th house is the more mystical house of the chart. It's where we sort of blur the lines. We want to reach for higher consciousness. We want to understand the mysteries of life. We want to dig deeper. We're not going to settle for the two-dimensional answer. My guess is somewhere around January, February, you may have started to say, you know what? I want to bring in some woo-woo element to my podcast. I want to start to look at things that I haven't looked at before. I want to explore new subjects. It's very much in keeping with the changes that are happening in your chart. The 12th house is also one that is about our physical health and well-being. So I have no idea how old you are or what your health is, but you may have started getting more interested in the body. You may have
I just want it for the record. December 31st, I released the episode Esoterica, Vampirism, UFO Religion, and Black Metal with Dr. Justin Sledge. December 31st, 2024. And then that was a marked change in how the show worked.
there you go.
I don't know, but I had to double check when you said that. I'm like, I wonder if she's right.
When I talk about a planet moving into a sign,
Mm.
I can usually give you that specific date. This planet's going to do this on this date. But that doesn't mean that's when we first start to feel it.
Mm.
Most of us will start to feel that new energy coming in ahead of time. So I may say this is happening in May, but you may have started feeling it in March. So as this new energy is activating this area of your chart, you may be thinking, oh, I need to get a checkup, or, oh, I need cataract surgery, or, oh, the doctor wants me to have this little procedure over here. You start to become more aware of your body because this is about health and well-being. And I love this. This is a very weird little combination with Neptune and Saturn because Neptune is all woo-woo, love and light, peace on earth, kumbaya, let's all join hands. Very mystical, very loving, very creative. But Saturn is kick-ass, take names. How do you do this? So what you're getting is a planet of meditation, love and light with something very practical and down to earth, and they're coming together. So you may see your podcast go in new directions because your podcast is your work, very grounded. I have to be on time. I have to do this. I have to know that. And Neptune is very, let's talk about your spirit guides. Let's look at your chakras, very mystical and magical kind of thing. So this is very exciting to me for you. I'm excited about this. I think this is going to be wonderful for you. This is coming in this year the strongest between March and maybe I'm going to say September. The last few months of this year, it may back off a little bit. But what it's doing for you is giving you a preview. So the things that you're just thinking a little bit about this year, you're really going to move into next year. You're going to go guns a-blazing in 2026. This year is when you start to say, you know what, this might work, or maybe this would be fun, or I should see about this or that. You investigate, you get some ideas together, and then in 26, honey, you're out, go and do and experiencing this. Oh, wait a second, your guides are coming in. I hope this is okay because this is not planned at all. But
It's okay.
what your guides are telling me is that more beginning next year, you're going to be starting to become more aware of their communication with you, whether that is through dreams or whether that is through sudden insight or whether that is just a bolt out of the blue. It's happening a little bit this year, but next year, this is going to amp up. And for a Taurus, this could be a little challenging because Taurus wants to know, where is this coming from? I need some facts and figures. How do I double check this? And spirit guide communication is not always like that. So you may be feeling a little push-pull, kind of thing. I got this download. My guides told me I should do this, but that doesn't make any sense. I can't do that.
Do you find
And
that
this is what
it's
happens for all of us.
Do you find that it's easier or more difficult to work with a client or a patient, however you want to call them, who is who has their own ideas about how this stuff works, or if it's someone who's just kind of coming in blind? Like,
Interesting question. I don't know if there's a better or worse.
Mm.
It's a different mindset. It's not like one is easier and one is harder.
Interesting.
For the person who's just coming into this, they often have a lot of questions. they're seeking to understand. They're seeking information. They're opening up. The person who's already been doing this for a while, they may have some really strong opinions about things. Like there are times I've said, well, you know what? Saturn's going to be doing this, and you're going to start experiencing some of X, Y, and Z. Like, no, that's not right. I get a feeling it's going to be the other way.
Okay.
And when that happens, I don't argue with them because that's their life and that's their intuition. And I'm not going to tell them they're wrong. I'm just going to say, well, that's fine, but hold on to what I'm saying as well. Just tuck it away in the back of your mind.
How
allow
often
both
do
to
those
have
people
expression.
come back to you and say, like, I think you were on to something. I was maybe.
Oh,
Yeah.
I've had clients tell me I was full of shit. Oh, can I say that?
Yeah, you can say anything you want on this show. There's nothing.
Okay.
There's literally
That's
no
fine.
word you could say that someone else hasn't already done. So it's fine.
Oh, good. Yeah. I'm pretty PG, but every once in a while something comes out, and I've had clients tell me, "You're full of shit. You know what you're talking about? That's never gonna happen." And I'm not gonna argue with them. I'm gonna say, "Okay, I'm just giving you my truth as I see it. You do not have to accept this." And then 3 or 4 months, they'll come back and, "You know that thing you told me was gonna happen that I said would never happen? Well, it happened." Yeah.
Right.
I'm like, "Okay." It's not a contest between me and my client. We're on the same page. I want them to have the best life possible and to use astrology to make their life easier, happier, more rewarding. But sometimes it's challenging. How do you tell somebody you see a really difficult period coming up for them without scaring the bejesus out of them? You want to be honest, but you want to be hopeful and encouraging.
Right.
And sometimes that is a very fine line.
You're listening to KEEP in the Keep. Please take a moment to tell at least one other person how much you enjoy the show. That's right. Grab that link and send it to that buddy you're thinking of who you know would be interested in what we're talking about right now. Maybe post it somewhere. I know it seems scary, but you can do it. I believe in you. Don't hesitate to leave a comment and a 5-star review, a like, wherever you're listening. And if you want, Patreon supporters for this show get episodes early, access to our secret Discord channel, chances to suggest questions to our guests, our games, and whatever else I can do for you. Every little bit helps. This podcast directly supports my ability to do what I love and take care of my growing family. The link is in the show notes. Thank you, bless you, stay in the keep. It's a big responsibility, I think, if you have the gift of clairvoyance or foresight or just the knowledge to make predictions, whatever that happens to be. Even talking to people who are like mediums, spirit mediums, whatever. Sometimes people don't want to know there's a spirit in their house, right? And as long as it's not a problem, like if it's not something that's malicious or going to hurt them, there's really no reason for you to have to forcibly pull them out of the fantasy world of thinking that that's not there. In my opinion, I think people. I'm a Taurus. I want to know the truth, right? I don't care how scary it is. I would rather know what I'm dealing with than to be, living behind the veil, so to speak. But some people you have to be like super careful with because it'll wreck their world. And I understand what you mean.
You have to be very gentle
Mm,
because astrology is not magic.
mm,
And when somebody comes to a medium, a reader, an astrologer, whatever, they often ascribe great power to this. And I'm like, no,
mm,
I'm just mentioning this. You can
right.
accept it, you cannot accept it. You're in charge. But here's what you might want to think about. I
Mm,
just think about this, kind of thing.
yeah.
And people will come in and say, don't tell me anything bad. I don't want to hear anything bad. And
Mm,
I'm like, okay. Have you had a totally perfect life up until now? You've never gotten a speeding ticket. You've gotten every parking space you wanted. You've got fabulous life with not a bad day in there? And they're like, "No." And I'm like, "Well, astrology didn't make that happen."
Mm.
So astrology doesn't make bad things happen or keep them from happening, but it does forewarn you. Like, let's say I see something in the chart and I'll be like, "You know what? Around the fall, it looks like there may be some financial challenges. Like you may want to just budget a little bit extra for that time. There may be some things that come up, you know." And they're thinking about buying a new car in July. And like, well, you know what? Let me wait till the fall to buy this new car. And then in September, they discover they need a new roof. Well, they have the money to buy it, to get the new roof because they didn't spend it on the car. Astrology helps us to say, don't step there, or this or that might be happening. But we're the ones that make the decision.
Right. When you meet someone who's like 27 to 30 and they're like having a massive spiritual awakening in their life and they're like, oh my goodness, I just feel like everything I thought before was a lie and I'm so much more open to all these new things now, but I don't know what to make of it and it's so confusing. And I'm always tempted to be like, yeah, of course that's the age that you are right now. Some people don't make it through this age. Like lots of really tapped in people in our just musical history don't get through this part and you're already past it, so just keep going. And then they're like, well, how do you know that? I'm like, uh, what's the correct? The God of spiritual wisdom is making full circle in your life. And you can look at that through a Jungian psychological lens if you want and leave it at that. But yeah, in astrology, you say something like Saturn has come around for
Saturn
you.
return.
Yeah.
Between the ages of 27 and 30,
Yeah.
everybody goes through their first Saturn return.
Mm.
Saturn is a planet of aging. It is a planet of adulthood, of responsibility, of career, of taking charge, of leadership and authority. It's not a lightweight. It's not a fun and fluffy planet. So I call it an astrological bar mitzvah. After you go through your Saturn return, it's like now you're held accountable. Now you are a grown up. Now the chart's going to start opening up at another level. So if I ask people what happened for you between the ages of 27 and 30, they're going to tell me something. I got married, I got divorced, I had a baby, I started my business. One client, oh, that's when I went to prison. I moved, big things happen. And you have to make your choices. And what I tell people is if you want a guideline on making good choices during your Saturn return, what is the choice that moves you into greater responsibility? Some people might get married because they figure that's a good way to hide out from life. Oh, life is hard. I just want somebody to take care of me. I'm going to get married and they'll take care of me and I won't have to worry about life anymore. There's nothing wrong with marriage, but that's not a good reason to get married during a Saturn return. But if you're thinking about it in a different way, oh, I'm finally ready. I'm ready to take on the responsibility of being a partner to somebody, of standing with him or her, of being a team, and you're taking on that new responsibility. That's the best way to use the Saturn return. So if you're using it in a way that is maybe not the best, Saturn works in 7-year cycles. That's why we talk about the 7-year itch in relationships, because after 7 years, you start to get tested on those choices. Oh, is this the right choice for me? Oh, I decided to hide out and gee, I'm not too happy with this, kind of thing. So, yes, we have 2 major astrological events that happen in our life. One is the Saturn return, which happens between the ages of 27 to 30. The second one is our Uranus opposition. That happens more in early to mid 40s. And again, that's when we have to kind of look at our choices. We have to start making peace with choices we made. Oh, I'm 43. I guess I'm not going to be a ballerina anymore. I guess I'm maybe not going to be a champion swimmer where they peak at 22 or something.
Right.
Do I like the choices I made? So astrology helps us understand ourselves better.
And The solution to your Uranus return is not to buy a new Jeep necessarily.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Don't embezzle the bank's funds and run off with the 20-year-old blonde secretary.
Right.
That is not the good choice.
Right.
But we start to get restless. We start to look at the choices that we're not going to have anymore. And sometimes people, yes, they can go off the deep end, but it's also a wonderful time to change direction, to change paths and do something new, to say, you know what, I've worked in this company for 20 years and I'm not happy
Mm.
and I deserve better. And they have the confidence to say, I'm going to go for it as a writer. I'm going to leave this. I'm going to do something else. And it can be very exciting. When we are talking to an astrologer or working with astrology, we have an opportunity to dig deeper into those issues and to understand why we may be looking at something one way or the other. Astrology doesn't stop. It can say, this is going to happen in 10 years. This is what's going to happen in 20 years. Now, typically, I don't usually go 20 years in the future because people are more concerned about what's happening in my life next week than 20 years down the road. When I'm looking at the astrology of the future, when I'm doing predictions for the country, for the world, I'll look down the road 20 years and see what's going to happen. But on a personal level, most people want to know, how do I make my life better this year? Kind of thing. We're Americans. We're very immediate,
Yeah. So do you think countries have the same thing? Like, does America have a sun and a moon sign and behave in a predictable way? Because I think 100% that's the case. Like every place I've been to, and I've been to a lot of countries, it's like you have a very particular personality. Like of course, each person within this group has their own personality, but like overall, there's something going on with this whole place that's unique to you. Even states, cities, whatever.
Every country
Mm.
has a birth chart. There's a moment when this country came into being.
Mm.
Typically in the United States, we consider our birthday to be July 4th, 1776.
Right.
But as a country comes into being, there are multiple steps for that, multiple stages for that. And different astrologers can use different charts. Oh, I don't use the 1776 July 4th. I use the Articles of Confederation, which happened in 73 or something.
Right.
Different astrologers can use different charts, but ultimately you're still looking at that birth chart.
Mm.
This country came into being at a certain time. Our country is a Cancer country. Our country was born under the sign of Cancer.
Mm.
And Cancer is a sign that rules food. The United States has been known as the breadbasket of the world. The United States is known as the fattest country in the world.
Yeah. Abundance.
Our citizens
Yeah.
worship thinness and we're overweight. That's that Cancer energy. It rules food, but it also rules home and family.
Mm.
So we have a lot of idealized images of being a mother. You're not supposed to have any problems. You're supposed to embrace motherhood and mom and apple pie. And sometimes those images can be a little idealistic. Being a mother is not easy. And so it's one of the reasons that a woman's right to choose or not choose is such an issue for this country, because it goes back to being a Cancer country. And Canada is also a Cancer country.
Mm.
And up until recently, that's why we've always gotten along so well. Both our countries are Cancer suns. We understand each other. England, I think, if I remember correctly, is a Capricorn country. And Capricorn's very stoic, very let's get the job done. And, what's one of their phrases? Like, keep calm and carry on. Just get
Yeah.
the job done.
For sure.
They're not effusive. Americans, our emotions are out there, like all over the place. And, England is much more reserved. That boisterous American over there.
Right.
So you can see that come out in their personality. Years ago, when I was in England, a friend and I were taking a train someplace, and we had to get off and change trains, and we asked somebody for some directions, and he said, yes, you can do that, but it's a bit of a bother. Here's a tip. If a British person ever tells you it's a bit of a bother, run like hell. You do not want to do this,
Right. Yeah.
That British understatement is
They're
very Capricorn-like, you know?
yeah. They definitely what about Denmark? Where do they fall on the
I'm
line?
not sure.
Yeah.
Some I just know off the top of my
Okay.
head.
Yeah.
Not sure about Denmark. Israel is a Taurus country. I remember that.
Mm.
Um, I didn't know this was gonna come up, or I'd have looked,
No, it's okay.
kinda thing.
We could do another episode later where we just dive into all this stuff,
That's
and we could
fine.
pre-prepare whatever you want, but no, I spent a long time in, Scandinavia, and much like Great Britain, the the personality type of Scandinavia in general is that if someone is never gonna tell you, like, bad news or a difficult thing, that it'll be very subtle, and you might walk right past it. Whereas I think Americans, we want you to just tell us
Blurt it out.
what's gonna like, the stereotype of America everywhere else in the world is the Texan businessman with a 10-gallon hat on, and he walks into the room with a white tuxedo, and he says, "Let's cut out the middleman and get right down to brass tacks," right? That's who we are, down to a T. But other people are, like, much more subtle, much more like, there's, maybe don't do that, but, it's your choice." And I'm like, "No." I also was military, so I think I'm really used to super direct communication, like, "Do this, don't do that. This is bad, this is good." Very black and white. Um, and I've had
The
to
United
unlearn that.
States is
Yeah.
Sagittarius rising.
Okay.
The United States is a Cancer sun, but Sag is our rising sign. And in astrology, the rising sign is what people see. It's how
Mm,
other people see us.
right.
You know, Sagittarius is very blunt, you know, not known for its tact. You know, I once had a Sagittarian friend I hadn't seen in a while. We were meeting for lunch, and we hugged each other. She said, "Susan, you look great." She was like, "Oh my god, that sweater covers up those extra 10 pounds like you didn't even gain them." That's a Sagittarius.
Right.
Like, they would be shocked if you were insulted by this because they mean it as a compliment. Like, they blurt things out, you know? "No, she's not fat. She just got knocked up and she's pregnant." You know, like, they just say it out loud.
Yep.
So Sagittarius is often the one who's kind of bewildered, looking around going, "What do you mean? Why was I supposed to say that? It was the truth." You know, Sag loves the truth, and so they often blurt out the truth. And Americans are known for kind of blurting out things and
Yep.
not always having the tact that other countries do.
My favorite World War II story about America is on the Eastern Front in, uh, the area just north of Australia, so we're talking, like, Papua New Guinea. They were fighting on the islands, right, to try to keep control of places, and, there were British troops, there are Australian troops, there's Japanese troops, there's Papua New Guinean there's all kinds of things going on, and the way that they could tell where the Americans had been is where most people would bushwhack their way through the jungle. America would napalm the entire forest and then wait for it to burn and then march across it. And that's not necessarily the best thing to do, but it's very efficient to get where you want to go. When I was first told that story, I'm like, that is a very good definition of how we solve problems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's that Sag influence coming out.
Mm.
Now, the moon, and in astrology, the big three are the sun, the moon, and the rising sign. So the United States has a Cancer sun, Sagittarius rising, and Aquarius
Mm.
is our moon. And think about this because Aquarius is a sign of freedom and independence, revolution. You know, you can't tell me what to do. And so think of a country born in revolution. You know, the Revolutionary War created our country. And think about just a few years ago when we were in the middle of COVID and Americans go, "You can't tell me to take a vaccine, but I don't want to take one. I'm not taking one."
Mm.
It's very American. You know, "Don't tell me what to do," you know, kind of thing. So I will say in general, and I talked about this in 2023 when I was giving a predictions talk. In 2020, I think it was in 2023, we had Pluto for the first time in a couple of decades move into the sign of Aquarius. And Aquarius is a sign of freedom, equality, independence, you know, fighting words kind of thing. And as Pluto moved into this sign, it moved into that sign for the world, not just the United States or England or Australia. The world is experiencing this.
Right.
So Pluto will stay there until 2043. And between now, which is 2025 and 2043, we are going to see the world change to move towards more independence, more freedom, more equality. And right now in the world, we're seeing the opposite. Putin's trying to take over Ukraine, and countries are fighting within and without and all over the place. That's the shadow side. In the early stages, we go under, we go to the shadow side. And then over these next, 17 years, we're going to start to move up into the light. So the countries all over the world that we're going to see in the 2040s are going to be unrecognizable to what we're seeing in the 2020s. Yeah.
So something I always think about when we're talking about our solar system is that our solar system itself exists within a larger system, right? We're in a galaxy and we're somewhere in the middle part of that galaxy going around through space. So like people talk about time travel, and if you could go back in time to this exact point or whatever, like you don't just need to go back in time. You need to like move in space. That's why space time or Einstein's theory are considered the same thing. So like if I were to be in this exact position 27 years ago or something like that, I would be in a completely different, unrecognizable part of space, right? That our planet is no longer in. And I reckon astrology 4,000 years from now or something, as we get more and more sophisticated, we'll have to take into account more than just what we see from this point of view. Like if I were born on Alpha Centauri, I may have a completely different set of things that influence me than I do on Earth. What do you make of that?
Well, I agree with what you're saying.
Mm,
And it's really hard to extrapolate 4,000 years into the future.
sure, yeah, of course.
But I will say that what we are seeing now with this new Aquarian energy is opening up to the kind of ideas you just mentioned.
Mm,
Aquarius is an air sign, and so air signs equate to the mind. How do we think?
mm,
One of the next things that we're starting to see come up now is going to be telepathic communication, mind to mind. And in thousands of years, we are not going to see the lag between thought and creation. We're going to see the instant thought to creation.
mm,
But at our level right now, we don't have that. We have thought, and then it's boom, 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 creation. And so we sometimes don't recognize that. We don't recognize, 10 years ago I thought this and now it's happening. But as we start to become, and when I say we, I mean the world, starts to become more sophisticated, we are going to start to explore more sophisticated forms of being. And I'd be very surprised, and this is strictly for entertainment. I don't know anything. This is just an intuitive feeling. I think the military is already experimenting with
mm.
telepathic communication because I think that's the wave of the future.
Well, that's documented.
Oh,
Like,
it is?
yeah. So the remote viewing
I
program
mean, I know they did
goes,
remote viewing.
yeah, that they've been experimenting with telepathic communication since at least the late 60s. And I mean, at least. And then it sort of went underground. Ingo Swann was like the head kind of civilian contractor involved in this. He's written a lot of books, very interesting guy. But it's not necessarily a secret that the military has done stuff like this, but the question is more now like how much of what has been disclosed to the public is just the tip of the iceberg as far as what they know, right?
Tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, but
They are not only doing
mm,
experiments in mind-to-mind telepathic communication,
mm,
they are having some success with it.
mm,
And so you need certain parameters, and obviously certain people are going to be better at this than other people. But what we are going to start to see in the decade ahead is more on our everyday American, go about our business and stop at the grocery store and do carpool kind of thing, is direct telepathic communication. You sometimes see this naturally occur with parents and children.
Have you heard the podcast, The Telepathy Tapes? With
No.
You need to listen to this.
Okay, let me
Yeah,
write that down.
write this down.
Telepathy tape.
And everybody listening, if they haven't got tired of me mentioning it on the show, but yeah, Kai Dickens is the lady's name, and she's a documentarian, but now she's doing this podcast series about mother and child telepathy, and a lot of the children involved are like non-speaking autistic children. So I don't know how
I
that
did
plays.
hear about that. I did
Yeah.
hear about it. I didn't know it was the name of this podcast, but I did hear about that. Yeah.
I'll be interested to hear your thoughts on it. So email me as you listen, like, oh my goodness. Yeah. But a lot of what you're saying is exactly what she's working on.
Sometimes you'll just be sitting and thinking, gee, I wish I had a cookie right about now. I'm too lazy to get up and go to the kitchen. And your little 4-year-old would come over and say, Mommy, here's a cookie.
Hmm.
And you're like, wow, that was a nice coincidence. But really, there's telepathic communication going on there. And I remember a friend of mine has a son who, this was years ago, he was, still in elementary school. He has cerebral palsy.
Mm.
And one day we were sitting at the lunch table and she was fixing lunch and he said something about, I think it was him who said, Mom, we can't do that because I'll be in summer school. And she said, do what? And he said something like, I don't know, go to Disneyland or something. And she said, sweetheart, I didn't say that out loud. I was just thinking that. So children do this a lot of times when there's that closeness and the doorways are open. Fathers and sons do it too, but not as obviously, I think. In astrology, one of the closest, strongest connections you can have between two people is one person who has the sun in one sign and the other person has their moon in the same sign. It's like the sun and the moon come together and they're joined. And yes, I see this with couples sometimes, but I see it more with a parent and child.
Mm.
Like there's just that innate understanding of who they are. And the water signs are very intuitive, sometimes very psychic. So when you get that sun moon combination in water, boom, like Princess Diana and Prince William, very, very had that very strong psychic kind of connection. You see it with Princess Kate and Prince William. He's a Cancer, her moon is in Cancer. Boom, it's like they meet up in the middle. They just have this sense of getting each other. And I see it a lot with parents and children. We're going to see more of that. There's Mommy and Me yoga and Mommy and Me Tai Chi, and we may see Mommy and Me telepathy class coming to a Y near you pretty soon. Yeah. We're going to see a lot more of this coming up.
So what's up with all the disagreement amongst astrology about when the Age of Aquarius officially begins?
Oh, I don't think that's really like a big fight or anything. You have to look at different ages. You're talking about thousands of years.
Mm.
And so some may say, well, it really starts 100 years beforehand. And some say, no, it doesn't. And I don't, I'm fine with whatever you choose to do it.
Mm.
The Age of Aquarius, hang on a minute. The time of the Christ was the time of Pisces.
Right. That's why we have
Time of love.
the fish.
The time of forgiving your enemies instead of fighting them.
Mm.
If you go further back into history, you have the Age of Taurus, which in the Bible, it's like worshiping the bull. Remember the golden bull that Moses came down and they're worshiping this golden bull. That was the Age of Taurus.
Mm.
Then he moved into the Age of Aries. Then he moved into the Age of Pisces. Now we're moving into the Age of Aquarius. And so, you are always, always going to have disagreements in astrology, Western to Eastern and, tropical and sidereal and, ones that are absolutely no, it's this. And that's fine. It's not one is right and one is wrong. It's just different ways of looking at things. As we're moving into the Age of Aquarius, we're moving away from an attachment to the body, more up into the mind. Aquarius is a time of the future, of inventions, of technology. we're seeing all this AI, we're seeing all this robotic stuff. So some of that is great and very good, and some of that can be very dangerous. And this is my own personal opinion, so other astrologers may completely disagree with me. But Aquarius, to me, harkens back to Atlantis.
Mm.
Are you familiar at all? You're nodding, so you're familiar with Atlantis?
So yes, and also a few weeks before this episode will be a whole podcast about Atlantis and Lemuria and all that stuff with a gentleman named Tim Kelly, he's deep down the conspiracy theory rabbit hole. But we did talk a lot about Atlantis. So, yeah.
Well, when I'm reading for clients,
Mm.
before I ever sit down with my client, I go into a time of prayer meditation. And lots of times, most of the time, while I am in that time of prayer meditation, I will see visions of my clients' past lives. I
Okay.
will see where they have been, what they did, the decisions they made, the emotions they felt, and what they're here in this lifetime to learn and deal with karmically. And so sometimes the past lives that I have seen have been in Atlantis. So I've read a lot about what Casey says about Atlantis. I've read a lot about what other people say about Atlantis. But I've actually seen everyday people walking and talking, living their lives in Atlantis. And it's very Aquarian to me, very technologically oriented, very higher mind kind of things.
Mhm.
As we're moving more and more into this Aquarius energy, I think the world, not just the United States, but the world is going to start to have to look at their karma from Atlantis. Atlantis is very technologically aware. They lagged emotionally, and they didn't stop to ask the question, just because we can do this, should we do this?
Mm.
And so now, in this day and age, in many ways, we're facing those questions. Hospitals now have an ethics board. Should we be doing this? Should we implant a daughter's, embryo into the mother's uterus so that she could carry it? Should we be doing this? The science is there, but the world is starting to realize we need to catch up emotionally.
Yep.
And so this is a lot of what the United States and the world is starting to deal with. The karma from Atlantis. How do we handle technology? How do we work with ethics and integrity as well as technological advancement? We're going to
It's
see these issues play out over decades.
it's definitely just in the past 10 years, the ethical questions that we've had to, as a nation, as a world, like, confront with ourselves, like, is just because we can solve your pain by giving you oxycodone, is that really the best solution, right? Like, just something as simple as that. Is this really something we should just be handing out like candy? Or with kids, like, it's ADHD medication, you know? Like, should we really be solving your behavioral problems with a medication you have to take for the rest of your life that we have no idea how it's gonna affect you in the long term? Because it makes it easier right now to teach you in a classroom.
And that's it. These are the very subtle, a lot of these are very subtle questions,
Right,
that, a lot of moral ambiguity there kind of thing.
right.
And so we wrestle with them, and we're supposed to wrestle with them.
Factory
Even if we
farming.
don't come out with
Mm.
a specific, this is what's right answer, the very fact we're examining that and seeking to look at that in a different way
Mm.
is part of growth and part of healing. Yeah.
Yeah, so what do you reckon happened with Atlantis? Like, what's your
Well, I
2
can tell
cents?
you what I see intuitively and what I know from what Edgar Casey says about it
Mm,
is that Atlantis existed for hundreds of thousands of years. It was not like one and done where we tend to think of it. And that Atlantis erupted with 3 separate eruptions or earthquakes or whatever you want to call it. That originally the landmass stretched from the Mediterranean to what we look at as Mexico and Latin America. And there was one, the third eruption was about 50,000 years AD. But then there was one before that at 100, and I think one before that at 150,000 years BC. Or maybe it was 50,000 years BC. But there were 3 separate eruptions, and each one divided the continent further and further until the last one sank the last of Atlantis, which was at that time landmass about the size of Australia and maybe New Zealand combined. Atlantis was considered to be extremely technologically advanced and a power in the world. And Casey talked about they used some sort of crystal as their power source, the Great Crystal. And this is a power source for all of Atlantis. They had submarines. They had planes or, things that would fly through the air. They could travel to other places. In the visions that I have had of Atlantis, I see moving sidewalks. And I see different temples with different kinds of healing machines. I see something that the best way I could say is like a laser, like we've only used in the last, couple of decades in our world. So very technologically advanced, but same things that we have now: power, greed, corruption, the whole 9 yards. And over time, the low emotional vibration was not doing right with the tweaking of how the power source needed to be taken care of, and they came into conflict, and there was earthquake. More thousands of years, another eruption. More thousands of years, a third one that finally sank the last of Atlantis. But many, many, many people all over the world incarnated at that time. Think about this. After the sinking of Atlantis, the world went into dark ages, working with,
The deluge,
pieces
right?
of
Like this,
bone and digging with their hands. Yeah.
yeah.
It's taken thousands of years to get to the place once again in the world of great technological advancement. So it is in these years that the world is facing the decisions that were made in Atlantis. Casey talked about the capstone, or whatever he would call that power source, went down in the ocean, and he said the place where the capstone was is currently under what we would call the Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah, so there would be, if you're looking at a chart of the Earth without the water, just remove the water from the Atlantic Ocean, you have the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, which is where you get islands like Bermuda poking up out of the Atlantic Ocean, but it's not that far underwater. It's just a sunken continent. People like Graham Hancock have gone out there and done different things, like try to pull up, soil samples and stuff, and they find, rocks that ought not be there that could be indicative of, something that was built there that's now been deteriorated. And then roughly 11,000 or so years ago, when the Ice Age ended, would be kind of when the water would have risen in sea level. And there's a lot of debate about whether or not that's a comet impact or earthquakes or all of the above, like who knows. But yeah, it's interesting. And if I had to put it on a map, just based off of what I've come to study, that's where I would put it. But just to, look at comparing Plato to modern stuff like Randall Carlson's work and all this kind of thing, it seems like Atlantis would be right in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, right where you have Bermuda.
And so the world is now at a place, finally, where we are able to be looking at Atlantis karma. A lot of technological advancement, and we're seeing a lot of technological advancement in health and well-being. We've got lasers and MRIs and what do you call pacemakers and artificial joints and limbs, and lots of progress in fertility treatments and what have you, and more to come. My head is spinning with all the things medicine can do and all the research they're doing now. But again, every new technological advancement comes with the questions of what's the long-term consequences of this?
Right. Even at the micro scale, even in your own life, these are the kinds of decisions you make, right? Like everything comes with a consequence. The old Aladdin and the genie, like be careful what you wish for mindset of like, oh, I wish I could just easily solve my problem that I have with my behavior with a pill. But what is the price you have to pay for that? And we're finding that out in so many different ways. Like as you said, there's a lot of ethical questions we're going to have to confront with ourselves as a society. I think it's hard for people, even just in one lifetime. You know, you don't necessarily see what goes on in the next generation until you become a parent. I would say, or have younger people that you're responsible for. I should say. We're a very selfish culture. Um, I would say people are very, very, very self-centered and not necessarily out of being a bad person, just not having the synoptic 40,000 foot, point of view about how things work.
One of the things that I always mention to some of my spiritual development classes
Mm.
are that from the moment our soul comes into a body, we're in a state of conflict with our soul.
Mm.
Because the physical self, we just want to be comfortable. We want a nice job, good boss, money in the bank, health. Leave me alone. Let me just la-di-da-di-da and have a nice life. We just want peace and health and, no difficulties. But our soul doesn't want that. Our soul came into this dense matter of earth to push against the matter of earth. Coming into earth, coming into a body is like what I call strength training. We have to push against something. The earth is full of duality. So our soul wants to learn and grow and it chooses these lessons. But our physical body just wants to be comfortable. Just leave me alone. I just want a nice, peaceful life.
Right.
So you know, one of the things that I always ask is let me learn and grow in the most positive way possible. I want to learn the things my soul came in to work on. It doesn't mean I have to learn them through getting hit in the head with a 2x4 over and over again.
Mm.
We can learn through awareness or we can learn through pain. And awareness is much easier. Take it from me. Awareness is much easier. Yeah.
What do you think, like, about the concept of like an old soul versus a new soul? Like, are there younger souls, or is it a fixed amount of souls? Um,
I do think there are older souls and younger souls,
mm,
but it doesn't have anything to do with how many lifetimes they've had.
okay.
You can have 100 lifetimes and be a young soul, and you can have a dozen lifetimes and be an old soul. Those concepts are not about a number of lifetimes. Those concepts are about the wisdom
Mm.
that you have gained in those lifetimes. And an old soul learns, grows, has a concept and understanding, is looking at things from a higher perspective. So instead of saying, "Oh, I've got a horrible boss and I hate this situation. Why does everything happen to me?" An older soul may look at that from, "Okay, what do I need to learn from this person? What can I give to them? What can I learn from them?" kind of thing. So an old soul is about wisdom and understanding, where a younger soul hasn't really gotten there yet in terms of bringing it up to a higher level. And
I
that's how I look at it.
I try to think
This
of
is
it more about spiritual maturity than I do about like
excellent way to
just
put it.
you could be 50 years old and immature, and you can be. I've met 12-year-olds that were like wise. I'm like, oh, this kid's really smart. Like,
And
really
that's it.
tapped in.
It's the same
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
If we come in, and in astrology, it kind of shows you your life lessons, what you came in to learn.
Mm,
So let's say you had a life in another lifetime where you were very successful professionally. You had honor, you had money, you had prestige, you had the big house and everything else. But you didn't pay any attention to your family. You're working all the time, going after the money or the almighty dollar or whatever. So you come into your life this lifetime and you say, you know what, I'm not going to do that. In this lifetime, I'm going to learn about family. I'm going to honor family and learn how important that is and how to be a member of a family. So you come in but you may still be driven to start a business.
Mm.
You may still have those talents. Those talents and abilities don't go away. Starting a successful business is a real gift. And so you can do the same thing. You could start another business and it could be successful, and you do the same thing and you think you're doing great. Oh, look, I made this multi-million dollar, company kind of thing, and I pay my taxes and I give to charity. I'm doing great. But really, you're just going to have to come in and do it again because you didn't learn what you came in to do.
Right.
So it's not about the recognition, the rewards, and the things of the earth that show us how we're growing. It's about, are we fulfilling the curriculum, the goals that our soul set before we came into this lifetime?
It's yeah, and there's that concept radiates through so many different just perspectives from around the world, religious, spiritual, or otherwise. Like we use the word karma so much now in Western culture, and like the New Age movement in the United States, I think, made a big shake. And you'll hear people who are ostensibly atheists or even Christians, but they'll use words that are completely associated with Eastern philosophy. And in some ways, I think that's a good thing, because it's like, I don't think the Veda had it perfect. I don't think the I Ching had it perfect. I definitely don't think the Romans had it perfect. Hopefully we get more of an African influence too over the course of time, because we have Egypt, but we don't really talk about the rest of Africa. Just Ethiopia alone is just as interesting as Egypt. People don't talk about it or know the history of it. But all of it coming together in a big melting pot has made us, I think, a little bit more advanced. There's a lot of woo-woo nonsense in there. You get your Father Yod type characters and your Jim Jones type people that kind of pop up. Not to compare the two, because they're completely different people, but like just hand-picking things from this and that point of view and throwing it into their own little, this is my spiritual teaching. But I do think about, some people talk about the souls, and they don't really know like where that goes back to, like if there was a beginning, if there was a start when the first soul was born on earth and that kind of thing. I do have, I guess in my own point of view, I try to look at it like life is a video game. I've heard someone say before that when you're in the astral plane and you speak with other beings who have never lived a human life, they're impressed that you've decided to do the challenge of being human. I don't know if this is really what happens, but it's an interesting lens with which to look at it. So, like the choice that in all, like a spiritual being of light, of perfect understanding and like existence in the heavens or whatever, to go, I'm going to go live this really limited life of being an earthling, of being a human being on earth, and have only 3 dimensions worth of understanding of anything, and then try to like do that. And then well, that was a good run, 75 years. Let's try it again a different way. And it sounds crazy, but then I think, okay, when I play a video game and I'm Mario and I play through a level and then I get smashed by a Goomba, I come back and I do it again to get better and better at it. And as you progress level to level, you master these different skills, and then by the end of the game, you're able to do things that you were not able to do when you first started the game. And just like you said earlier, it's not necessarily how many times you play the game. Some people catch on really fast and they beat it the first time they play it. Some people, it takes them a long, long, long time to get there. But ultimately, do you keep playing the game or do you not keep playing the game? That's your choice.
I agree with you. I never heard that analogy to playing a game, but it's absolutely spot on,
Yeah.
because it's not about just coming back into an earthly body. It's about, how hard are we working? How closely aligned are we in achieving the things our soul came in to achieve?
Mm.
Because I don't think life is just random. Oh, you go back into your body and, do the best you can, don't write, kind of thing. We come in with goals. Like we go to college, we pick a major. I may learn a lot of other subjects, but we're going to focus on this subject, And so we come in with goals of what we're going to do and how we want to do that. But it doesn't mean we do. That's, maybe we're discouraged, maybe we're tired, maybe we're afraid. It's, we have a lot more confidence in ourselves when we're not in a body. When we are in spirit, it's like, oh, we could do anything. We come into a body and it's like, oh, what was I thinking? I don't like this. I don't like this at all.
It's if you're playing, especially role-playing games, because you can make your own character and make different choices, right? So, like, if I play a Dungeons and Dragons video game and I master the game and I beat it all the way through, and at the end of it, I'm like, okay, sick. I did that as a warrior cleric or something. Like, what if I do it again as a mage from who's half elf and has all these completely different ability? Like you might be better at some things that you were. The first round you had all these advantages in this way, but you couldn't unlock doors or something, or you couldn't cast spell, whatever. You play it in a completely different way. And then now that you've beaten that twice, you have two different perspectives. And then you play it again about like, this time I'm going to be an orc and I'm going to be a paladin and I'm going to come from this different background and I'm going to put all of my skill points into something else. And I think that's a really good analogy for like how souls interact with human life, if I had to guess.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I think it's a great way to put that because as we grow, as we learn, in some ways life becomes easier.
Mm.
But remember, the more we know, the more we're held responsible for it.
Mm.
So it's not just about knowing this, it's about how are we living this? Because when you get there, you're required to live that. So when you have the concepts that the soul grows and learns through forgiving those who have hurt you, and you have a father that beats you or a mother that deserts you, you may not feel like forgiving them. That may be the last thing on your mind. So the question becomes, how are we incorporating that which we now know? And one of the things I say all the time is that there's a big difference between knowledge and wisdom.
Mm.
Because we may know forgiveness is the answer, but we don't get to wisdom until we have walked that path and found that forgiveness and used the concepts that we know. You can take every class, read every book, go to every course, deal with all the spiritual teachers, but if you're not finding ways to live those truths in your life, you're not getting to the place you want to be.
Do you think that there are folks who have like reached the end of the game and are controlling and like waiting on the rest of us to catch up?
Well, if you've reached the end of the game, you're not controlling.
Okay.
If you've gotten to the place of that kind of wisdom, sort of like the prime directive of spiritual growth
Sure.
is free will. I'm a little bit of a Trekkie.
Yeah,
At
me
least I
too.
know the prime directive.
I've got the
And
Enterprise on that arm.
oh my
right there.
goodness. So you can't interfere and say, oh, they're mucking everything up. Here, let me fix that.
Mm.
You have to be respectful. But absolutely, when you get to your point of being there, getting there, whatever, then your goal is to help other people get there.
Sure.
Which
Yeah.
can be very frustrating.
I've heard people talk about like the idea of your guardian angel is not, it's not necessarily like the biblical interpretation of the angel. This is like someone who's a soul that is much further along in the game than you are, who's coming back to like lend a hand. Hey, don't do that. Or, hey, this is going to sound weird, but you're going to have a kid who's going to be special and I need you to name him John. Don't question it, You're listening to KEEP in the Keep. If you love this show and you love supporting indie video games, please take a moment to check out In the Keep's upcoming Stellar Valkyrie. Built in the GZ Doom engine, this retro first-person shooter puts you in the universe of space bird bounty hunter Falco, who is on a mission to save his ex-girlfriend from the evil Black Star cult. Just type birdgame.space, that's BIRD game.space, into your browser. Hit enter, smash the wishlist button, and stay tuned. Trust me. Bye. That
We
kind of
all
thing.
come in with guardian angels.
Mm.
And our guardian angel is with us from the moment we take our first breath to the moment we leave this life. They're not allowed to say, "Oh, this Tyler, he's completely mucking up the whole thing. I'm out of here."
Mm.
No, they stick with us to keep doing their best to help us. They're not allowed to take over for us. So you can whisper, you're going to have a kid and John should be a good name, but the person can name them Zachary or
That would have been his
whatever they
name
wanna
if
do.
they hadn't called him John. His name would have been Zachariah after his father. Yeah.
So spirit guides have had lives on earth because spirit guides have to understand what the challenges are on earth. They have to understand what it feels like to be hungry,
Mm.
to be discouraged, to be afraid, the limitations of the body. They have to have an understanding of that, where angels in the angelic kingdom do not. If you have read the Bible at all, and I'm no Bible scholar, so I'll just say that up front, but I was always taught the story of the prodigal son is we're the son that goes out into the world, who
Right.
squanders everything, who mucks up everything, who, completely, loses everything, tired, discouraged, sick. They crawl back home again. But the sons that have always been there, the ones who have never left, that's the angelic kingdom. They've never been hungry or thirsty or had to go to the bathroom or
Mm.
worried about paying the rent or, been worried and stayed up all night with a sick child. They don't understand that. So the angelic kingdom wants to help us, but they don't necessarily understand what it's like to be human. Spirit guides are with us and they do understand what it is like to be human. And that's why we need their help. But they can't do it for us. They can whisper, like you said,
Mm.
they can nudge, they can encourage, they can guide. But the spirit guide's purpose is to help us achieve what we decided to do, not to necessarily be happy and not have any problems. If we have to go through a difficult experience to get to where our soul is supposed to be, our spirit guides are not going to stop that. I don't know, you're obviously much younger than I am, so I don't know if you're familiar with the well-known ice skater Scott Hamilton,
Nope.
but he was an Olympic ice skater and won gold medals and all the rest. And he said when he was younger, he had a lot of breathing problems. And somehow, when his family took him to the ice rink, he could breathe better. So he said, "I was at the ice rink all the time." And that's how I got into ice skating.
Mm.
So something that seemed really bad or difficult, and his parents may have been saying, like, "Please, help my child breathe better." A spirit guide is not gonna wave their hands and make them breathe better. That difficulty with breathing may have helped him achieve his life purpose. So, the difficult, very challenging thing is instead of looking at the challenges in our life as us being a victim, or why can't I ever be happy, or why does everything happen to me? Look at those things as, oh, what can I learn from this? How can I use this? How can this help make my life better?
Mm.
Which is a challenge because I've often said I'm going to write a book and the title is going to be Why Does Everything Happen to Me? Because
Right.
we all think that's what our life is like. Yeah.
What if someone wants to get in touch with their spirit guide? Is there something they can do to do that, or is it just something
Sure.
you have to? Okay. How does that?
Everybody can get in touch with a spirit guide.
Mm.
The first thing I would tell people to do is before you go to bed, start to talk to your spirit guide. Just talk to them like they're your BFF and sitting next to you.
Mm.
Talk to them like they're somebody you just met. "Hi, I'm Bill, and you are." the first thing I tell people to do is to ask the spirit guide for their name. You may get a nice name. I'm Benjamin. I've heard spirit guides give me their name, and it's unpronounceable consonants. Um, Bajawana Nunu. Like stuff that makes no sense. It's not about having a name you like or don't like. It's an introduction.
Mm.
When I was working with my spirit guide, I started asking for a name. It took me 10 years to get a name.
Mm.
At the time when I finally got a name, I couldn't have cared less. By working so diligently for 10 years, I'd already established communication with my spirit guide, so the name was just unimportant. I did have one of my clients call me up and say, Susan, I just got my spirit guide's name. I was getting very discouraged. It's been 2 weeks and I didn't get a name. And I'm like, I'm just going to smack you, 2 weeks. That's nothing. But start to ask for their name. And when you do this before you go to sleep, what you are doing is you are lifting your mind up to a higher level. And then you are going into an altered state of consciousness, because that's what sleep is. It's an altered state of consciousness. But I would be very diligent about this. Start to talk to them. Ask them for their name. Ask them for any help you need. And one of the things I often suggest people do is ask them what they need to tell you. What do they need to communicate to you? Guides do not always, and in fact, rarely, communicate with us the way you and I are communicating, voice to voice. They may communicate with you because a book falls at your feet at the library, or because an old friend calls and mentions something. These are all synchronistic moments that your guide is working with you. I will say, I kept asking my spirit guide to speak to me. I wanted to hear my spirit guide's voice. I wanted my spirit guide to speak to me. And I was very diligent about asking this. And so one day I was driving to work when I was in Atlanta, and I was in the car, and I was starting to merge onto the interstate to get to work. And I hear a voice in my car say, "Hello, Susan," but there's nobody else in the car. And I'm freaking out. I'm like, "Not now, not now, 70 miles an hour, this is not a good time, not a good time." I'm like yelling at my guide and telling him to shut up. Like, do you have no understanding that this is dangerous? I am completely freaking out. So be careful what you ask for. You may not always like the answer. Ask your guides to communicate with you in the way they are most comfortable, in the way that you can communicate the best. You might also use some visual stimulation for that idea, like see a door opening or see a path getting wider, because our subconscious deals with images more than words. So create some images that go along with the words. Invite your spirit guide into your life every day. Talk to them every day, even if you don't think you're hearing anything back. If you're diligent about this, you'll start to open up those doorways. You'll start to get the communication more. You'll start to be more aware of the presence of your guides. So yes, work on it every day. Work on it at night. Start to talk to them. Ask them for a name. And most of all, listen. Ask them what they want to tell you. What do I need to know from you? Start to listen.
Do you reckon when people think that they're talking to the big G upstairs, that oftentimes they're talking to their intermediary?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so. But it doesn't matter because they know they're communicating with a higher wisdom, and hopefully they're listening to that. So, yeah, I agree with you, but it also isn't a big deal to me.
Yeah. It's very interesting because you get into, you were mentioning Edgar Casey earlier, but I was also thinking of like what's his name? Dane Rumdar, famous
Jane
astrologer.
Rudyard?
Rudyard, yeah, that's how you say his name. Like, or Blavatsky. Like a lot of these people are like Ledbetter. They had these really intricate views of like what the hierarchical steps of this whole
Oh,
cosmic thing is. And
Annie Besant.
yeah, Annie
If
Besant.
you have trouble sleeping, Read Isis Unveiled, and it will put you right out.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's on Spotify now as an audiobook if people wanna but
It is not like reading. You know?
it's
You have to really focus.
yeah.
So there's a lot of esoteric information out there,
Mm,
but you have to really kinda dig a little bit for the more esoteric information. You know, there's a lot of information at a very basic level that's all over the place.
mm,
But if you wanna go deeper, then you have to dig a little bit. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. It's very fascinating. Like, because I think when people walk into the library and they wanna find a book on the subject, like, "How do I get into this?" And you like, if you go into Barnes& and Noble and you're in the New Age paganism section or whatever, what I don't even know what they call it nowadays because it changes all the time, but
Mhm.
there's a million books on astrology, and I have to assume 98% of them are total BS, right? Like, so
Yeah.
which ones do you think folks who are interested should just grab as like little pieces?
If you're beginning
Mm,
and you're just a little interested and that's it, I would pick up Linda Goodman's Sun Signs. It's a classic. It came out in the '70s.
mm,
It was the first astrology book I ever picked up. And what I love about her book, there's no math, nothing complicated. It just concentrates on the 12 signs. And it may say, here's Taurus is a man, Taurus is a woman, Taurus is a boss, Taurus is a child. It gives you a very thorough understanding of each sign.
mm,
And that's the foundation of astrology. And it's something I tell people all the time. If you want to learn astrology, learn the 12 signs first. It's the most important thing you can do.
mm.
I would also say Isabel Hickey. What is the name of her book? It's a classic, A Cosmic Science. You know, I love that book. I just love that book. She goes into a lot more detail and depth about all the different aspects and parts of astrology. But even as a beginner, you can pick out what you want and leave the rest kind of thing. And it's very well written. And it brings in a lot of the higher concepts and more esoteric. She talks about the soul a lot more.
Mm,
And I would also say Stephen Forrest. He wrote the book The Inner Sky, and that is about, again, the building blocks of astrology. And Stephen Forrest is the only well-known person whose autograph I ever asked for. When I was in Atlanta, I was attending a conference he was doing, and I asked him to autograph this one of his books because I love his books, and he's such a good author and such a great astrologer, and that is the only person whose autograph I ever wanted, and thankfully I got. So I love his work, and he's very good,
What's the
and
name
he
of
has
that
a
book one more
lot of
time?
things on his website. I'm sorry?
The name of that book one more time.
The Inner Sky.
The Inner Sky. Yeah, I'm just gonna make sure these go in the show notes for people who are
Yeah.
interested.
So all of those are very good books for the beginner. You do not have to know a lot of astrology. It's written in layman's terms, and you shouldn't have any trouble understanding it.
Yeah.
But my mother, my father, my sister are all Taurus, like you, and I'm the only one in the family not. And when I read Linda Goodman's book about Taurus, it opened my eyes. It was like, this is why they're that way.
Mm,
This is why I struggle with this. Like, I finally understood my family. So I think it's a great book. Even after all these decades, I still think that book is a classic. I have mine and the binding is all worn and
mm.
pages are falling out, but I won't get rid of it because I just love that book so much.
Oh, yeah. My wife gets so upset with me for the sheer amount of books that I buy. I have to have physical books. I can do an audiobook if I'm doing stuff or driving or whatever, but I like a paper book in my hands a lot. You can't see it on camera, but there's a stack of them over here. The living room there's 2 different bookcases full, like, books falling off of them, and then the side tables are covered in books, and it's like it's my one and only thing that I just can't not spend money on.
You're
Mm,
one of us. You're a
yeah,
book person.
yeah. So we talked a little bit about, spirit guides or guardian angels and such, but what do you think about the voices that are telling us not good advice? What are those?
Well, I think those are often voices of our own fears,
Mm,
our own subconscious. when we're ready to embark on a new path or do something that we know we're supposed to do, and somebody's like, "You're never gonna succeed," or "Who do you think you are?"
Mm.
or "You're gonna lose everything and be a homeless bum," and I think those are voices from within
Okay.
ourself, our own fears coming in. Um, and so I don't know how we can never not listen to those or have them. We just have to make sure they don't take over. We just
Mm.
have to make sure that we keep ourselves centered. Now, when we are having a little too much to drink or, doing maybe something that's not strictly legal in terms of substances or whatever,
Right.
um, remember, I grew up in the 60s and the 70s. I'm a lot older than you. But when we do put substances into our body that can be considered toxic, it weakens our auric field.
Mm.
And our auric field is meant as a field of energetic protection for us. So when that field is weakened, we can be picking up negative thoughts, negative words, negative actions from other beings. Yeah. And we don't want or need them. And so one of the things I'm always telling people, because people who are empathic are a little bit at risk if they don't know to protect themselves.
Mm.
So you feel fine and you go out to a sporting event or a concert or even the mall or the grocery store and you're in there for an hour and you come out and you have a headache and you're cranky. It's because you are picking up bits and pieces of everybody else's emotional refuse that they're throwing off. And if everybody around us was throwing off love and light and peace on earth, that would be one thing. But people are throwing off, am I going to lose my job? And how am I going to meet the mortgage? And is that kid ever going to graduate high school? And, how do I do this or that? Or, oh, I forgot to mail in my taxes. They're throwing off worry and fear and concern and anger. And this is what our energy field is picking up if it's not protected.
Right.
So before you were going to go anywhere around a lot of people, even people you like, even if it's a family party or going to church or synagogue or something, surround yourself with light. Lift that light up, protect your energy field because otherwise it's too easy for negativity and energetic harm to kind of come at you. So you want to stay centered, you want to stay protected. Yeah.
Yeah. What is an empath?
Somebody who is very sensitive to emotion, to feeling, who is
Mm.
very open on the energetic level. And that's a good thing. I'm not saying that is a bad thing. An empath can sort of read your emotions. They are going to become aware of things you're not saying. They're going to become aware of what's going on with you, which is great if you're a professional reader and you need to read that person. But you also don't want to carry away that person's pain.
Yep.
Does it make you healthier? Even if you want to help somebody and your best friend is in a lot of pain, it doesn't help them for you to be in just as much pain.
Absolutely.
So when you're empathic, you're open to sensing, feeling, and experiencing the feelings and emotions and attitudes of the people around you. So you have to make sure you can help them without losing yourself.
It's one of those gifts that's also a curse in many, many
Yeah.
ways, especially if you're not educated on how to deal with it, or if you're not open to the idea that it's a real possibility. I think I spent 27 years of my life denying that I felt that way, and then I had so many different people be like, "Listen, this is what you need to do. Like, you have to stop being so open to other people's emotions and stuff. Like, it's too much for you, and it's what's tearing you down. It's like literally why you keep doing the things that you're doing is because you're surrounding yourself with negativity, trying to help, like, with the best of
It comes
intentions.
from a good place,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
But hurting us doesn't make the other person better.
right,
And like you, I had to learn that the hard way.
yeah,
You know, when I first started doing readings, I didn't protect myself at all.
mm,
And in readings, people are releasing a lot of emotion and a lot of stuff is coming out, and it's coming out all over the reader. And so after months, after like a year, I said, I can't do this anymore. I was just
Yeah.
completely worn out. I was overwhelmed. I said, I can't read for anybody anymore. And I had to learn, just like you,
Yeah.
that protecting myself does not make this a worse reading. It just means I'm protected.
Yeah. I just found that I have to spend a lot more time I actually read I forget the name of the author, but there's a book called like The Empath's Survival Guide, which is kind of I mean, it's practical, the book, but if for someone who is not a spiritual minded person, it can come across as really too much. So I would just say, take the advice. The first step is to just take the advice. And then, maybe do like less alcohol, less illicit substances, even caffeine, and spend more time by yourself and get comfortable being by yourself. And then don't for me, it was like I had to learn how to not be afraid to just tell people like I can't deal with this. Like I do not have the energy for you right now. Doesn't mean I don't love you. It doesn't mean I don't care about your problem, but it means that neither of us are going to solve this problem if you keep dragging me down with you. So,
You deserve to be as kind to yourself
mm,
as you are to other people.
yeah. Um,
And that's hard. It's hard to learn to not be so self-sacrificing, you know. And so before COVID, I used to do several psychic fairs or events a year, but I would sit down at 9 a.m. I'd leave at 5 p.m. and I'd have person after person after person after person after person doing mini readings. By the end of the day, I'd just be like out of it. I'd had
mm,
so many people's energy coming at me. And I'd go home, and the first thing I would do is take a bath with apple cider vinegar,
mm.
because a bath in apple cider vinegar helps to clear and cleanse the auric field. And I would have to just let go of all of that. And so we have to take care of ourselves too.
We were talking earlier about telepathy, and I think that empathy gets left off the table so much. We'll simultaneously describe it as a real phenomena in psychology, and then pretend like it doesn't mean anything in practical real life situations. But it's hard to explain to someone who doesn't like believe in it. And I used to be like, I don't believe in anything that I can't prove. I was literally a scientist, and that's how I viewed the world. Like, this is it. And then I became more open minded as I was faced with certain challenges that kept pushing me in that direction. But yeah, I keep I kept talking to people about like six senses or whatever it is, for you. And you have sight and smell, and you have olfactory, and you have taste, and you have touch and stuff. And then it's like, what is that thing where someone else that you're not even in the same room with is hurting, and you have a connection with them, and you also hurt with them? Or someone else, you share someone's happiness. And like, I can understand if you're saying like, well, you see the smile on their face and that makes you happy, or you feel them shaking and that makes you, I get that. What about when they're not there? What's that? How do you describe that? And they're like, well, that's just, some amalgamation of other things. I'm like, but
It's
taste is an
coincidence, it's not
amalgamation.
statistically probable,
Right.
all the rest of that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, but it seems to be observably real, and enough people claim to feel that it's actually valued. Like, we want people who are empathetic in life. Someone who lacks empathy is considered a complete outcast from society, and in many cases are just put to death because there's nothing else you could do with them. Like a complete sociopath is universally agreed to be not the best member of a group, right? Um, so like, is in your opinion, like, what is the source of that, and how do people deal with that?
I
Coming to
mean, what
terms
is
with
the
that.
source of that connection where we
Sure.
can share a thought or something?
Mhm.
To me, the source of that is the soul.
Mm,
It is the higher part of who we are. The physical, the hands, the face, this is just the covering of who we are. This actually keeps us from that place. When we can lift up enough to where we're in connection with our soul, with higher energies, and somebody else is also lifted up, we can have that kind of connection. And those moments, those woo woo, those synchronistic, those what just happened moments,
mm,
to me, they're very important, because they are encouraging us that, yes, there's something here. Yes, there's something beyond the physical. Yes, I'm going to keep going to see if I can get better at that. So those are the moments that remind us that we're more than just our body. We're more than just what happens in our day at the office or whatever.
Mm.
That, that's just a step that distracts us from connecting and living from the soul level. And all the things that are going on in the spiritual community these days, they are ultimately about living from the soul instead of living from the body and the physical.
Mm.
So to me, that's where that kernel of divinity is. We all have that spark of divinity within us, of something more than this. And when we can connect to somebody else who also has that, it amplifies through each other. And we're like, yes, this is what I mean. For people who may have had those magical moments, those mystical moments, they never forget that. They may talk about that the rest of their life
Mm.
because they realize that was something beyond our everyday existence. And it showed them something in a very real and tangible way that was closed to them before.
What's going on with people who don't exhibit empathy?
That don't exhibit empathy?
Mm-hmm.
Well, like you said, for somebody who's incapable of understanding, exhibiting empathy for other people, they're sociopaths
Right.
and have no concept or care of pain or suffering that they may visit upon other people. They can be a grifter or a con person that steals your life savings and is thrilled about it. Oh, they had to put their grandmother out on the street, but I got, $800,000, good for me.
Yeah.
You know, it's it's empty. It's like sometimes you could look at those people and there's nothing there behind their eyes. They're empty.
Yeah.
And so they're not in connection with any part. I'm not saying they don't have a soul or that spark of divinity,
Mm.
but they're not aware of it. They're not in connection with it. Everything is about very low level energies. Me, mine, now, give me. Concepts of other people don't exist for them. And so
In
to me, that's a very lonely kind of life.
in no way am I suggesting any kind of like astrological eugenics, but can you predict if someone's going to be more or less empathic through astrology?
It's kind of a loaded question.
Mm.
I I cannot necessarily predict to what level
Mm.
somebody is going to develop their empathy or psychic or intuitive abilities. What I can see in a chart is how strongly present they are.
Mm.
I used to get very angry at my clients because I would look at their charts and their charts were psychic as hell. And I look at my chart. My chart wasn't nearly as gifted as their chart. I'm like, why are you coming to me for a reading? I
Mm.
should be going to you. But
Right.
I was working with the little bit I had, where they weren't working at all with the huge amount that they had. So I can see whether those gifts are strongly present or not, but it doesn't tell me to what degree they're going to develop them. That is strictly up to them.
Oh yeah. My brother's 250 pounds, 6'3", and I'm like, why are you not a professional wrestler or something? Like, what are you doing? But he doesn't have to. Some people have gifts that they just aren't meant to use in this life or whatever it is. But it is fascinating when especially if you meet someone really young who seems like they have the key to the city is in terms of like psychic ability, right? Like my niece, I don't want to make too many predictions about her, but I'm just saying she's 100% turned on at 3 years old. Like she scares the hell out of her dad with the things that she does. She predicted to me who my wife would be before I knew. Like she just the things that little kids say, like that old Bill Cosby show. Like the kids say the darndest things, but really, really, really fascinating kid. Um, and then I think, at least in my observation, we're all kind of born with that to some degree or other. and then you lose it when you go through puberty. Like, it just goes away. And then you have to,
start
like
to lose it when you go to school
okay.
because you're around teachers and students that want you to sit still and do this, and you're really being taught to conform and come down to this level kind of thing. So lots of times when kids start to go to school,
Mm,
I start to see that lessen. I don't know that it's gonna go away, but I start to see it lessen. Around puberty is when I start to see it go dormant because they
mm,
wanna be like everybody else. They wanna fit in. They don't wanna be different. But then lots of times in their adulthood, after their Saturn return, I see those gifts start to come back around.
yep.
They start to reach for them again. Yeah. Sometimes shutting them down is self-preservation. You know,
Mm,
you don't wanna go through life feeling everybody else's pain. You don't wanna be so wide open, you have no protection against, all the difficult emotions everybody's going through.
right.
And you don't wanna be an 8-year-old in a classroom going, you know, "I'm sorry, Miss Brooks, that your husband loves that other woman more than you." You don't wanna blurt that out in a classroom?
Mm,
So little by little, that starts to become less and less. But if you're in a household, if you're in a family where it's accepted or it makes it okay, then you can find ways to keep it, but still be accepted by everybody else. A friend of mine's son was born very psychic, and he could see those on the other side.
mm,
And luckily, my friend understood this and, was not scared of this and taught him how to use it. And he was, I don't know, 7 or 8. She was trying to get him to go in to take a bath. And she was like, "Get in there and take a bath." And he was young. "I can't. Dead grandpa's in the bathtub." And my friend, who is very down to earth and a practical Virgo, she goes, "Well, tell grandpa to get out of the bathtub and you get in and you use soap."
mm,
Like it was totally normal in their house. It wasn't a big thing. It wasn't, "Let's take you to the pediatrician," or "You need medication." It was like, "This exists and you're still going to take a bath." So he grew up with wonderful guidance and a skill set on how you balance both of these energies. Most people don't.
yeah.
Most people's parents don't always encourage this, you know?
I think my mom was aware, like, she had it down. She's like, "Okay, I know what this is." But my dad had no idea how to deal with me, and it's okay. I don't hold that against him or anything. How could he? But, he's like, "I don't understand why this kid's not throwing the football." And I was really sensitive as a kid. I would cry all the time. I could just, like, see someone and feel like immediately just break down crying, and I was so sensitive. I did terribly in in groups, like, going to school was so overwhelming for me. I wish I had had opportunities to be, like, homeschooled, but that didn't happen. But maybe the trial was necessary for me of just getting through that, but it was so much. I hated every single moment of school unless I was, like, the highest performing person and I was getting doted on for how smart I was or something like that. Otherwise, it was a nightmare. Um, Being in the military was also, like, really, really, really hard for me. Not only from being surrounded by people from all kinds of different, things that they're dealing with, but also knowing what we were doing and then contesting that in my mind all the time. I found that some people are really, really good at, and God bless them for they're able to just turn their emotions off. And they're like, "I understand that I have to do this and it's not pretty, but that's it." I could never do that. It was so difficult to just forget what's going on the other end of this mission or something like that.
And this may sound a little sexist, I don't mean it
Mm,
to, but there are certain signs that are a little bit more difficult for males to be born into.
okay.
And Cancer is one of those signs, not Taurus, but because Cancer is very sensitive.
Mm,
They're very empathetic, they're very emotional. And so boys are still, even in this day and age, they're not encouraged to feel things. It's like, shake it off, rub some dirt in it, stop crying, man up. They're not like, "What's the problem?" And "I'm sorry, hurting." They still don't get that. And for women, Aries is a sign that is very difficult for women to incarnate into because Aries is pushy, forceful, dynamic, aggressive. And even in 2025, like, well, who does she think she is? Well, she's kind of a boss. Doesn't she think she's special? So, each one of these signs is a little bit difficult for certain genders.
Mm.
And yes, when males come in with a lot of sensitivity in their chart, it's really difficult because it doesn't get supported.
Yeah.
And women aren't encouraged to break the glass ceiling and to go do it. They're like, "Well, maybe you should tone that down,
Yeah.
he may not like that kind of thing."
Mm.
So, yeah, you could look at a chart and I can say, "This may have been difficult for you," or "You've had to find a way to moderate this," because that's there. I would, bet money that you've got a chart with a sensitive moon in it that's gonna feel things, that's gonna be empathetic, and born into a kind of like, say, regular household that didn't understand how to deal with that.
Mm.
I tell people all the time, I love doing the charts of children because it's like the secret weapon for their parents. I can talk to their parent about your child's gonna be interested in this, or your child's gonna struggle with this. And so many times when I'm reading for the parent like that, they're like, "Oh my god, I'm not a bad mother. I'm not a bad father. This is just who the kid is," you
Yeah.
know? It gives them a great confidence, and it helps them understand when their child does this or that. Like Gemini is a very restless sign. They probably a lot of Geminis are on ADHD or, diagnosed with that. So I tell parents, don't try to get this kid to concentrate on history for an hour.
Mm.
Do history for 20 minutes, then switch to math, then switch to artistic something, then come back to it. They'll learn better. But if parents don't know that, they just think the kid's playing around and putzing around and won't concentrate. So when a parent has their child's chart done, it helps them to understand what their child needs, and it makes everybody much happier. So I love doing children's charts.
Yeah. But let's just say, like, if a public school system just decided one day, like, okay, we're gonna get everybody's star signs on the first day, and we're gonna sort you all into classes based on what we think you might need by that, you would get so much opposition, right? Like, people would hate that. But, ancient Greece, they probably did that all the time. They're like, the 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 Masons won't even let you in if they don't like your star sign. Like, they're like, f before you sign up, like, what's your moon sign, what's your sun sign, down to the minute, we wanna know when you were born and where and everything, and then if you're like, it doesn't look agreeable to us, goodbye."
Thanks, yeah, thanks
Yeah.
for playing. Here's some lovely parting
Yeah.
gifts.
Yeah.
Bye-bye,
Yeah.
It's one of my clients is a teacher, and she, of course, had the sun sign information for all of her students.
Mm.
And she realized these 2 students, most of her students were, I don't know, water signs and artistic or water and earth or something, but she had these 2 fire signs who just kept interrupting everything and wanting to do everything.
Mm.
So she talked to another teacher in another classroom who had a lot of fire energy in her classroom, and they switched. Her 2 students went into the fire classroom, and the other teacher's 2 students who are water went into her classroom, and everybody started to bloom.
Mm.
They were with other little kids that understood them. They felt comfortable being who they were. So, yeah, I wish school systems would do that, but sadly, I don't see that happening
No.
anytime soon.
I have
Yeah.
no faith in the public school system do do well at this point. My older brother's a public school teacher, and he hates his life, so it's terrible, because you
They
feel
hardly
helpless.
teach anything. All
Yeah.
the rules and the regulations and I don't know how they ever actually get into any information.
Well, there's been studies about it, like, where you go to school for roughly 8 hours in a day, and you spend, like, 20 minutes actually getting instruction because of all of the other things that they have to deal with. It's like you have to, like, navigate the hallways, and you have to take a moment to address, if you had 30 people in a room, no matter who those 30 people are, they're all gonna have these different side tangents that they go on. I was the king of that in school. I was the person who, like, everything the teacher said I had a question about or, like, a comment. I loved participating in the conversation. I just hated everyone else clogging up my ability to learn. That was the hard part. It's like, "Man, no one cares about your idea. We're talking about, like, the great Thomas Aquinas right now, and I really wanna know this particular question about him. So if you could just be quiet." me and this
Just
teacher could
be
get somewhere.
quiet.
Yeah.
Shut up and listen to what I have to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Other countries have really found other ways to deal with their educational system that seems in some ways to be working better than ours, but, you know.
Scandinavia's school system is extraordinarily interesting coming from an American background. Like, I mean, I'm not really gonna have like a better or worse, but they don't really grade people based on your performance. It's kind of like you just move up as you move up in age, and you can hold someone back, but it's like not really necessary. And also interestingly, they don't learn a lot of the things that I think that we hold like extremely valuable. So I'll give an example. What the secretary in the office that I worked in over there, her name was Helen. And I'm like, as soon as I met her, I'm like, "Oh, Helen, it's so great to meet you. You're like Helen of Troy. That's just wonderful. Helen of Argos." And she's like, "I don't know what you're talking about." And I'm like, "You made it through all of your education, and your name is Helen, and no one has ever brought up the Iliad or the Odyssey to you. Not once." And as I got to kind of asking people, like, "What did you learn in school?" They learn all the practical stuff. They learn math, they learn science, they learn reading and all, like literature, that kind of thing. But what we would call literally a classical education stemming from ancient Greece is not really the system that they use anymore. So
I
very
did hear
fascinating.
that. I don't know if it was in Norway or some Scandinavian country that every hour the kids would get breaks. Like every hour they'd get like a 15-minute break or something like that. And
Probably. It
I
sounds about
can't see
right.
that happening here, but I think that's a good idea because they're little kids.
Yeah, when I was in high school, which admittedly was, now I feel old. Like that was like 10 years ago. But when I was in high school, they had moved from the period system of like basically every class is an hour to you break it into 2 semesters and you have 2.5-hour classes,
Oh,
roughly, or something like that. So it was like you spend a lot longer in a given teacher's room and you do it for half a year, and then you move the next semester to a completely new set of teachers. This was in Alabama. I'm sure that across the states, there's all kinds of different systems for dealing with this. But
yeah.
um, and then we have summer breaks where we like just forget everything like that we learned throughout the year, and then we come back. I think Georgia a long time ago went to just like 4 quarters with longer breaks in between instead of a full summer off. But it's
I grew up
odd.
in New York,
Mm,
so we went to school through June, and then we had July, August, and we didn't go back to school until after Labor Day in September.
yeah.
We're down here, they're out more in June and they're back in August. So
Where
it's
you at now?
I'm in North Carolina now.
Oh, okay. We're not far. Either way you go,
Yeah,
Atlanta or
Columbia. Yeah, not too far away.
yeah, yeah. No, North Carolina's got a lot of really interesting stuff going on with like metaphysics and spiritualist type people meeting up. Is that what brought you there, or is it just coincidence?
No, I moved to North Carolina because this is where my mother was living,
Mm,
and she was in her 90s, and she needed some help.
mm,
So I said, "Okay, I'm gonna move to North Carolina, and I'll be there to help her."
that's cool.
So I moved in literally next door to her,
Mm,
so she could have her independence, but I'd be right there.
mm,
And I thought, "Okay, I can't tell anybody what I do. I can't I'm gonna be stoned to death or something," but
nah.
I was really surprised at how open people were and how excited people were, and, it's very active spiritual metaphysical community.
As much of a bad rap as the South gets about the Bible Belt thing, there's a crystal shop in every town. Like, there's witches everywhere, like, and or whatever you wanna call it, but there's a lot of people who are super open-minded, but they're more used to kinda keeping it in their space,
Keep it
if
on
that
the
makes
down
sense.
low,
Yeah,
yeah.
um,
As soon as people find out what I do, "Oh," and they'll tell me all their stories, and they'll come out about this, but
mm,
until they kinda know it's accepted, they'll
mm,
they'll be a little more reserved about it, I'd
yeah,
say.
yeah.
You're listening to KEEP in the Keep.
Whatever happened to the good old days, when computer role-playing games spent more time telling great stories than stressing you out with season passes and needless grinding? Call of Ragnar is our effort to bring back the best in RPGs. Play in the immersive world, as two friends adventure into a murder mystery that lands them in the middle of a battle between gods. Head over to callofsaregnar.com. That's callofsaregnar.com for more info. And be sure to wishlist on Steam. What are some of the great astrologers of history in your mind? The people who really...
Evangeline Adams. I mean, she was great and um, one of the best.
Mhm.
One of the best. And I think at some point, I'm trying to remember, she was arrested or charged with being a soothsayer or something. And so the judge gave her his birth information. And she privately did a reading for the judge, like, this is what this tells me. And the case was dismissed. Like, I don't know what she told him, but whatever it was, he dismissed the case. Then there's, what is that guy? Nicholas somebody. Was it Copernicus? Um,
Copernicus?
no, it wasn't Copernicus. He was a scientist. I can't remember. He did a lot of work with Hori astrology, with the astrology of questions.
Mm.
How do you answer a question? How do you look at it this way, that way? So he left a lot of good information. But currently, and of course, Isabel Hickey is a famous one. And currently, I would say Stephen Forrest is right up there. One of my favorite astrologers. He's really good. I look for astrologers who can talk about astrology in very down to earth, practical ways that say, this is how astrology can help you. But Evangeline Adams wrote at least one book, maybe more. I don't even know if they're still in print now, but I would look at them. I would see what's there. And what's his name? Oh, I forgot the guy's name. Wolf? He wrote that. He does evolutionary astrology. And Green. Ugh, I can't remember his name. He's really good. So look up evolutionary astrology.
Okay.
And he really combines the path of the soul with what you're going to do in your everyday life. Because we all still need to earn a living. We need to pay our rent or mortgage. We need to put food on the table. So we don't necessarily have the luxury of leaving the quote real world behind to just go study astrology in a vacuum.
Mhm.
This is a time of studying astrology and then picking up your kids from school and, stopping at the grocery store and what's for dinner. And so I'm attracted to astrologers who understand how to bring those together.
Yeah, I'm reading a biography of, I think, Aleister Crowley right now, and one of the things you realize as you're going through this is like, okay, and then he joined this group, and he joined that group, and he joined this group, and he joined that group, and he wrote these poems, and then he was up on a mountain and all that. And I'm like, at a certain point, I realized, like, he doesn't have to work. His family's rich, so he can just do whatever he wants all day. And, like, imagine if, yeah.
I mean, there are a few people who can really make a lot of money with astrology. I mean, not astrology, but with metaphysical stuff.
Mm.
I'm sure Sylvia Browne with her, 2,200 books did pretty well.
Yeah.
John Edward had his own television show. Teresa Caputo, her own television show.
Mm.
But that is a very small percentage of people who do this. The vast majority of people who are doing any kind of metaphysical work do it as a sideline. Like either they're married and their spouse pays most of the bills, or they have a regular job, or they have another income, and this is to supplement.
Mhm.
Now, this is my full-time job. This is my livelihood. And I'm one of the very few who actually makes a living doing this.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's not easy. This is not necessarily an easy way to make a living,
Yeah, do you have, like a shop, or do you just kinda work,
I don't. Most of
online?
my readings are done via Zoom.
Yeah.
So, I have my website. I put out articles. I do personal readings for people. I do talks and classes. On July 6th, I'll be doing a predictions talk
Mm.
for what to expect for the rest of the year and a little bit going forward, because our country is in a little bit of chaos right now and people are concerned. And so I'm thinking, what can I do to give back? What can I do to help the world and the country? So I decided to do a little predictions talk. And then in July, I'm going to teach intermediate astrology. So I teach classes, I give talks, I read for clients, and somehow I manage to make a living. But it is a very challenging way. If you were depending on this to earn 100% of your money, you're going to be a little challenged. At least in the beginning. If I get me on television show, then all right, I'll be fine. But
Yeah.
for right now, it could be a little challenging. It's up and down. Yeah.
I think a television show would be terrible. Like, I've talked to a few people who have done stuff like reality TV or whatever. Like, I had Barry Fitzgerald was on the show, and he was on like Ghost Hunters International and all that stuff back in the day, and it does not sound fun. Like, I'm sure the traveling and the getting to see things is fun, but like the way that you're portrayed on television and the invasiveness into your life, I couldn't do that.
I thought it would be fun to have a show once a week where a different person was on. Like you get 4 different people. One is a medium, one is astrologer, one is a card reader,
Mm.
one is, I don't know, numerologist. And each week you see one of those people talking about whatever it is they want to talk about. And I thought that would be interesting to the public
Mm.
and maybe not too demanding on each individual.
Maybe what you need is a YouTube channel, not a television
See, I've
series.
thought about it,
Yeah.
but you have to remember you're talking to a senior.
Mm.
And it's barely all I can do to handle my website.
No, I
So
understand.
I would need so much hand-holding on doing a YouTube channel. Press this, do this, you have to get this. I'm not against it, but there's gonna be a steep learning curve for me on this.
I mean, you could, if you just learn how to upload a video to YouTube, right? I mean, you could just have just do it like a podcast where you do a Zoom call with the different people that you think are interesting, and then just upload that video straight to YouTube. And over time, you might decide, "Oh, I want to do a little audio mastering, or I want to do some graphics or whatever." But you could just start easy and work your way up to it. But yeah,
Maybe I can do that
it
'cause
is a lot of
it
work.
would have to be very simple.
Yeah. Podcasts, if you want to do like a good production, is a lot more work than people think. I get a lot of people who are like, why don't you do more video content? And I'm like, I don't want to learn how to video edit. Like, it's a lot of work. If I could pay someone to just do that for me and depend on them to be timely and on my schedule and all that kind of thing, then it would be really easy. But I don't like the video for like just seeing someone's Zoom call or someone's Discord call or Google Meets or whatever. If it were in person, there was a while where I was producing a podcast where I had access to like $30,000 worth of camera equipment and people to do the editing for me and all that kind of thing. And that was really nice, but it's a lot of moving parts. And then I was constantly kind of at odds with the people who were spending the money versus what my vision is. And I didn't like that so
Is
much.
this your full-time job?
Well, my full-time job is that I run a video game studio, and this podcast is just part of that company.
I saw that on the
Yeah.
when I checked out website or podcast, I checked it out and I saw a lot of the game stuff,
Mm.
but I wasn't sure what the balance was.
Yeah, I mean, but this company is my full-time job. I'm just the head of the spear of a whole group of people who are making games, and I'm producing this podcast, and there's
Ooh,
dealing with
you should
clients.
create a game
Mm.
that combined astrology and spiritual development, where you had to overcome certain quests to move into your soul and divinity and higher levels of consciousness.
Yeah, I think I have some things I need to get off my plate first. That like there's 3 different games that are sort of like in production that I need to finish and before I take on more. But I think that the next thing after that is going to be something, what everything that I'm learning about right now and all of this stuff, I think it will naturally manifest in that. But since you bring that up, in the game series The Elder Scrolls, it's a role-playing game. The Skyrim, you may have heard of, is like the most popular one. But as your character acquires new traits, like your charisma or your strength or whatever, the development sheet is actually in the stars in all these constellations, and you're sort of growing the constellations as you add on to these things. So there's a lot of that very well represented in the video game world. There's a lot of people who are, writers for video games or designers for video games who are like tapped in to that sort of thing.
And then when you reach your soul level, you get to design your own universe. And what kind of universe would you design?
That's how I view making games. Number one, it's telling a story or creating something for someone to do, and then part of that is that you are creating a universe with you define the parameters of and all that sort of thing. Some religious folks don't like to view it that way because it's like you can't be God. I'm like, I'm not claiming to be God. I'm just saying that I am creating a little universe. Like these little computer people that live in here are just a lower dimensional being than we are. That is how I see it. And maybe one day when they, they figure it all out, then they'll be questioning, who made me? Where did we come from? What was the origin of life? Did we evolve over thousands of years, or were we created by some wise bearded man in his garage? I don't know, but we'll see.
Yeah.
What do you think about Nostradamus? Because we were talking about making long-term predictions.
I have a lot of respect for his predictions, but also a lot of frustration because, of course, you're talking about translating them from the original language, and then they're coded, and it's much easier to understand his predictions in hindsight than it is before they come up. And so even though I have a lot of respect for him, I'm more very practical and down to earth. I want to just hear it. I think this is going to happen here, you know. And so that's what I do with my predictions because I know how frustrated I get. I don't want to hear, oh, it looks like, the world will go through many changes. Bullshit. I know the world is going to go through many changes. I want to know, what is going to happen and what do we need to know? So Nostradamus is not as specific and clear as what I would like.
Yeah. In the 90s, we had this huge group of people who were like doing that sort of thing, and they were given a lot of space in the public to talk. Like Gordon Michael Scallion comes to mind, like people who were making like, there's going to be an earthquake in California.
Anything else? Yeah.
Yeah. There's going to be a earthquake. It's going to be 7.9 and it's going to happen right around this area, and it'll happen by August, and then we'll see what happens. And of course, you sort out the wheat from the chaff of who's a charlatan versus who's not. But if you can demonstrate in real time, so Nostradamus didn't have to live to see whether or not most of his predictions even came true.
And so you're trying to figure out, what does this mean? And did it mean this? And did it mean that? And so, yeah, I definitely think he was scrying. I definitely think he was seeing things. But you also have to understand, I think a lot of times he didn't understand what he was seeing. So how do you explain that to somebody? And then he was trying to code stuff so he didn't get into trouble, kind of thing. So his stuff requires some work. A lot of Casey's predictions. I've read quite a bit of his predictions, and he's pretty good. His health stuff is spot on. I've used lots of Casey's health, recommendations. But he did make a lot of predictions, kind of thing. But yeah, there aren't too many people. I'm trying to think of somebody who really put predictions out there who was spot on. Maybe not 100%, but more than a majority percent right. They would say this or that's going to happen, So let's see. Sylvia Brown, I think it was Sylvia Brown. She said that in 2020, we were going to have a major outbreak of something, and then we were going to deal with it. And then in 2030, it was going to come back again, and we would have to deal with it again. That prediction I remembered. Jean Dixon made a lot of predictions. And I'm trying to remember. I mean, she read, or whatever you want to call it, visited with Roosevelt. And I remember reading her book, and she said she took her crystal ball and she put it under a mink stole that she held in her hand so nobody would know she's carrying a crystal ball into the Oval Office to see the president.
Yep.
And she said he asked her how much time he had left. And she said that much, like, you have almost no time left. So I mean, Lincoln was having seances in in his personal quarters.
Yep.
So there's been readers and predictions all over the place, and people have been trying to decode revelations for a couple of thousand years and those kind of predictions.
Mm.
So nowadays, so much is happening that is so tumultuous, and things are changing on a dime so quickly that it's really hard to be spot on about what's coming up.
Okay.
So, whatever prediction somebody's making, I give them a lot of leeway because this is chaotic. This is, so much that from one day to the next, you don't know what's happening, much less weeks or months. So, those are some of the ones from history. Jean Dixon was spot on about a lot of things. I had a lot of respect for her. Trying to think of ones closer to current times, and I'm not thinking of anybody right
Mm.
off the bat.
That's okay. If you think of somebody, you can just be like, type it in an email. Throw that in the show notes. People need to know about this. That's fun. Yeah, I I think that I mentioned earlier I was a scientist, right? So I was a weather forecaster in the Air Force. So the whole concept of trying to predict what is going to happen in the future depends on data and models, right? So I got to, in real time, like over the course of 4 years, see the Air Force go from using weather models that were made by civilian organizations like the North American model and the global forecasting system and stuff like this. So then they were like, okay, we're going to have our own supercomputer AI model that predicts these things. And when it first started off, it was trash. And our job was to compare, like every time we made a weather forecast, we would use what was the most accurate. And then we would record what the actual weather was when it happened and compare that back to the model and then give that feedback. And then over time, that model became the best model, like by far. Highest resolution weather forecasting system that I'm aware of in the world is the Air Force's GAL-1 model. And that only took a short amount of time. Art Bell used to talk about the quickening all the time. He was like, everything's moving faster and faster every day, and people aren't realizing it because it's happening around us. But one of the things that makes it better is just simply that it has more data to go off of. You need to feed it more information. When you're trying to predict, okay, if I say tomorrow in your town in North Carolina, the weather is going to be X, and I'm wrong, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're a because people joke about weather forecasters all the time. Like 50% of the time, you're wrong. Okay. The question is, how much input did I have to make that prediction? So if you were a astrologer or a prophet or whatever, and you're trying to make a prediction about something that's way far off in the future, I judge your accuracy based on how much you had to go off of at the time. Not necessarily like, I don't just assume that someone is receiving a divine message in their head and then they're just spitting that out as it was given to them by the Archangel Michael or whatever. I'm thinking you're looking at patterns and making a prediction based on those patterns. It's the same way with you read someone's natal chart. That doesn't mean that on December 2nd, when you're 22, this is going to happen to you and you're going to go through this. It's just like, here's we call it the forecast funnel. And somewhere within this cone, you will probably land. And that cone gets wider and wider, like a sine cosine type of thing as you go further in life.
We'll say every January,
Mm.
I do a predictions for the new year talk. And I look at all the planets. I tune in and intuitively meditate, and I ask for guidance, and then I'll stand up. Typically, it's a 2-hour talk. And in the first hour, I'll talk about all the things I see happening for the coming year. And in the second hour, I'll talk about each one of the 12 signs and what I see happening for that sign for the coming year.
Mhm.
And so it's just for entertainment, it's just for fun. What do I think is going to happen? And usually over the course of a year, um, I'll see most of the things that I predict come true. I don't want 100% of the things coming true because lots of times I don't want this or that to happen. But I'm surprised this year that I have seen so many things that I predicted in January happening so fast. The time is speeding up.
Mm.
And we are seeing things that would have taken a year, taking months, things that would have taken months, taking weeks. Like, we are seeing things happen really fast.
Yep.
And it's a little discombobulating. You're like, "Oh, my, that happens already. It's only March." Like, yeah. So all of us who work with these energies have to adjust to that and allow for that and look at things in a new way because of that, because time is speeding up.
There's an interesting concept. We think of like when you swing a plum or a pendulum, that it's supposed to slow down over time. Right. This is gonna get a little deep, so try to entertain me for a second. If the universe is expanding, right? Like if it's literally spreading further and further out, as we've been told. I don't know if that's true, but we're gonna posit that as the model we're working off of. And the pendulum is swinging the same distance observably, but the universe is expanding, then it is therefore swinging further each time it goes, which would mean that it's getting from point A to point B, if that's a further distance, faster, right? You're covering more space in the same amount of time. In the video game Quake, there was this concept that we called strafe jumping, wherein which if you walk in a straight line, like point A to point B, you move at a finite distance. You can run, you're still going to move at a finite speed and distance. But if you jump side to side as you go forward, you actually move exponentially faster. And this is something that like people who are playing against each other figured out. And then now it's like an intrinsic part of that game. You also see it in games like Counter-Strike that a lot of people who are listening may know, where you do these movement techniques because you're moving faster, even though you seem to be actually moving in a zigzag pattern. And the reason that as I understand it for that is because if you imagine a grid, a square, and you're moving from one unit up across that square, from one edge to the other edge, you're moving one unit. The computer is calculating one unit of space, right? Here. But if you're moving diagonally across that square from point, like the angle to angle, it's still one unit of space, but you're crossing a further distance. And I wonder if that's not what we're observing to some like grand extrapolated level.
I never thought about that. I honestly never did. It's quite possible.
We move in curves. Everything in the universe, gravity,
Well,
is
there's
all
no straight lines in
right.
the universe.
Yeah,
And that's
Euclid
why
was
everything
wrong.
we put out comes back, because it doesn't get to an end and stop. It just, yeah. We're living in some very exciting times. And as we move forward, they're going to become more exciting. And for us, we chose to come in at this time to experience this. And sometimes I get a little, oh, what the hell's going on in this world? And other times I'm like, I can't wait to see what happens. I can't wait to see what the world becomes. And I hope I get to see that in my lifetime. So I think we chose wisely and well. We came in at a very exciting time where the world is open to new possibilities, and man is reaching a level of understanding where mankind is able to understand those concepts.
What advice do you have to give to someone who would like to become a professional astrologer such as yourself?
Wow. I would say do not hang your shingle out after you took one astrology class. Study, know your craft, know your subject, know the planets, the houses, the signs, know the movement, the aspects. There's a difference between understanding astrology and being a good reader, because you have to be able to communicate that information to somebody else. So if you want to be a professional astrologer, I am assuming that you would be reading for other people. So I would say study a lot of different types of astrology, brands of astrology, a lot of different authors in astrology, and see a therapist. Talk to your own therapist about your own problems, your own life, your own challenges, because this is what your clients are going to be talking to you about. Do not misrepresent yourself ever as a therapist. You're an astrologer. And if you can, I would say get licensed, because astrology can be licensed. Get licensed as a professional astrologer, because people are going to need to know they can trust you. Understand the ethics. I will not read for anybody one-on-one below the age of 18. I always stress the privacy of a reading. Don't just hang your shingle out and start going and figure it out as you go along. Understand what you want from being a professional astrologer. Not just that astrology is fun, I'm going to do it, but look at it as your profession. So look at it with pride and ethics and integrity would be what I would tell you. Because people are going to come to you with trust, and they're going to come to you looking for answers.
If
It's
someone
the best profession in the whole world.
if someone wants to like get a license, is there tests that you have to pass, or like a committee of people who
Yes,
have to
there's
agree?
the International Association of Astrologers. You could look it up online.
Ah,
And they offer testing. I think they offer it once a year. Now, when I first started out, I was living in Atlanta, and Atlanta was only one of 2 states at that time in the United States that offered testing and licensing for astrologers. So I took my test for licensing, I don't know, back in the early 80s in Atlanta, and that's where I got licensed, but I don't think they offer that anymore.
yeah.
So I think the only place you get licensed now would be at the national level, but I would look at that. Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah, that's super cool. Okay. I think that's all I have for today.
Well, I did not know what we were gonna talk about, but we have talked
Yeah.
for 2 hours and 45 minutes, and it has been delightful.
Yeah.
So I am really glad that I got to meet you and be on your show and hear all of your good insights. So I'm excited. I took some notes about some of the suggestions that
Oh,
you gave me that I'm gonna look up.
I've got a whole page worth of things that I've written down over here to look up later, or include in the show notes for people who want to, try to do their own research and decide how they feel about it. And I'm sure I'll get some feedback and all that. It'd be fun.
I will say
Um,
on my website,
mm,
exploreastrology.com, every month I put out free predictions for each sign. You do not have to join anything or pay anything.
mm,
It's my way of giving back to the community. So you can go to my website and you can look up your sign if you're a Virgo or you're a Sagittarius or whatever it is, and you can see what the month holds. I should have June's astrological predictions posted on there by tomorrow, I hope. And I will also say, if you go to my website, you can sign up for my free newsletter. And I send out a free newsletter on what the new moon and the full moon is going to be. So, again, it's just a way of sharing with the community.
okay. Well, thank you so much for your time and all of your insight, and for your career's worth of knowledge that we've tried to condense down here. We have to do it again because we already addressed several things. We're like, oh, we got to come back to that. But yeah, I'll try to be a little bit more prepared, I guess, for like specific
And so
questions
will
on here.
I.
Yeah.
Send me your birth information. I'd love to see what your chart looks like.
Yeah, I'll email it to you right after this, and then you can you tell me what you think.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks.
Thank you,
Thanks for
ma'am.
having me on. It's been fun. Take care, and we'll touch base again.
Thank you so much to Susan for loaning us her time and expertise and entertaining all of my weird questions and strange, thoughts. Thank you for listening. I hope you'll go check out her site, take advantage of all those free resources that she is providing, all over there on Explore Astrology. And thank you for listening to the show for so long. If this is your first episode, I guess, thanks for coming for the first time. But for those of you that have been here with us since the beginning, I really want to say thanks for coming on this journey with me. Thank you to our Patreon supporters, especially Couldn't do this without you. Don't know where I'd be without you. If you would like to support the show, there's a lot of ways to do that. Just go to our website, click on any of the recent articles or on the support page, and you will find various ways to do that. There's lots. I appreciate every little bit. It helps. Such a dream to be able to do this now full time. Just thinking back, like where we were 5-6 years ago, where we are now. Where were you? I'll look forward to hearing your thoughts on this episode in the comments and on the Discord, discord.inthekeep.com. Always love hearing that feedback. Till next time, I love you. God love you. Stay in the keep. Let's take a moment to talk about Appalachia TCG. Whether you're searching for sports cards, Magic the Gathering, Flesh and Blood, Pokemon, or Yu-Gi-Oh!, they can offer you an extensive selection to suit every collector and competitor. As an official reseller, they are committed to providing authentic booster packs, singles, accessories, and rare finds that set them apart from competitors. They buy and sell lots of trading cards and toys, but their special is the Flesh and Blood trading card game, and they run official events, pre-releases, and more. Along with their ever-growing community, Appalachia TCG is the premium spot for trading, buying, and selling cards. I know what you're thinking, but I don't live in Eastern Kentucky. Well, that's the best part. You can shop online and in person. There is the official TCG player shop, eBay store, and online shop. Head on over to AppalachiaTCG.com. That's AppalachiaTCG.com. Tell them In the Keep sent you.
Hi, I'm Ben, host of the Field and Foley podcast. Every episode I sit down with incredible guests, not just sound designers, field recorders, or musicians, but experts in everything about audio. We explore the creative process behind the sounds that shape our favorite games, films, and experiences. Whether you're an audio professional or just someone who loves great sound, Field and Foley offers deep dives, behind-the-scenes stories, and insights you won't hear anywhere else.